Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're so excited to welcome you to Ignite Fair's 2023 Canadian University panel. My name is Grace. I'm the External Affairs Director of Ignite Fair, and I will be one of your MCs today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine. I'm one of the co-chairs of Ignite Fair, and I will also be emceeing the panel today. If we could go to the next slide of the presentation. Meili, is the screen share working? Okay, yeah, sorry. Sorry, my bad. So now if we could get all of our Ignite Fair MCs to introduce themselves. Other than me and Grace, we have a team of Ignite Fair MCs that will be hosting the breakout rooms that will be happening later on. So maybe if we could just go down the list, starting with Meili.
Hi, I'm Navy, and I'm a writer at Ignite here, and I'll be emceeing the CS and Engineering breakout room.
Hello everyone, my name is Parsa and I'm marketing coordinator at Ignite Fair and I'll be emceeing your computer science and engineering breakout.
Hello everyone, I'm also a writer at Ignite Fair and I'll be emceeing the science breakout room.
Hi, I'm Allison and I'm a marketing coordinator at Ignite Fair and I'll be emceeing the science breakout room as well.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a sponsorships coordinator at Ignite Fair and I'll be emceeing the business and CS breakout room.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm an NPO coordinator at Ignite Fair, and I'll be emceeing the economics and business breakout room.
Okay, can we move on to the next slide? So we are really, really excited about what's in store today for the panel. Sorry, one second. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, here at Ignite Fair, we aim to connect youth with meaningful and accessible volunteer opportunities in their communities. Our flagship event is a volunteer fair at which high school students looking for volunteer opportunities can be connected with local organizations that need them. Next slide, please.
Okay, so since being founded in 2014, we've reached over 7,900 youth, committed over 29,000 volunteer hours, and represented over 400 organizations. Now we've expanded to hosting other events and initiatives such as our middle school Spark session presentations, the Spark Show podcast, and our annual university panel.
We hope you enjoyed this event and look forward to seeing all of you at this year's Ignite Fair, which will be powered by Volunteer Toronto and is taking place on November 25th from 1 to 3 p.m. More information will also be shared at the end of the presentation.
Okay, so to start off, let's look at the itinerary for today's event. So as displayed on the screen, we'll begin our event here in the main room where our wonderful panelists will be answering questions about choosing a university, the application process, sharing their advice, and funding your education. Afterwards, we'll be splitting off into subject-specific breakout rooms where you will have the opportunity to ask our panelists any burning questions that you may have.
So without further ado, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. We can just follow the order of the slide presentation, starting from Michelle.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Wan. I am about to go into my second year at the University of British Columbia. I study the combined degree in business and computer science. And yeah, very excited to be here. Thank you.
So hi, my name is Annie, and I am a computer science student at the University of Waterloo. Thank you for having me here.
Hi, my name is Kunal. I'm going into my second year at Western in economics with the hopes of one day going to Ivy Business School at Western. I'm also a Western National Scholar, so super excited to answer any questions that you might have about scholarships or university in general.
Hi there, my name is Maya. I am an incoming computer science and business administration second year. So hoping to do all just like Kunal with the Ivy HBA degree. Aside from that, I'm also in Western Scholars Electives program, which is a research module, and I'm also a Western National Scholar. So yeah, any scholarship questions or research related questions, send them my way.
Hi, I'm Jerry. I go to Waterloo. I'm in mechatronics engineering, class of 2027. And aside from doing engineering, I'm also a pilot. So I have answers for both of those, I guess, if you're interested.
Hi, my name's Emily. I go to U of T and I'm in my third year for accounting. And yeah, happy to be here and answer any questions you guys have.
Hi, that's me. My name's Alex. I'm in software engineering at U Waterloo. Sorry if I look like crap. I just got home from like biking. Yeah, I want to learn more about becoming a pilot, Jerry. Tell me about that. But yeah, thanks, guys.
Emily was unfortunately not able to make it to the event today, but we'll be showing a video that she sent over. So Carrie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Carrie, and I will be entering my third year studying HBA Honors Business Administration at Ivy. And my pre-Ivy program was BMOS, which is just the general business program at Western. And yeah, super excited to be here and answer any questions you guys have.
Hi, I'm Mylin. I'm going into my third year at the University of British Columbia studying oceanography and biology. I'm also in the inaugural class of climate action and studies for the school. I do a lot of stuff at the school. I do my own research in marine biology field research, and I also am developing a new class for UBC undergrad students. So I'm very happy to answer lots of questions. If you ever are down at the beach in Vancouver, you'll probably find me there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia. I'm also a National Scholar and Scholars Elective student at Western. Previously, I took some courses in medical science and computer science. So if you have any questions about that or economics, I'm happy to answer them.
My name is Roseanne and I study computer science at the University of Waterloo. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know.
Hi, my name is Ratisha. I'm studying cognitive systems at UBC, and basically the courses I've taken are all like an interdisciplinary approach to philosophy, linguistics, computer science, and psychology. It's basically a program for artificial intelligence, kind of going into that field. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Hey, my name is Krish. I'm headed into my first year at the University of Waterloo for computer science and business, a double degree. And yeah, super excited to answer any questions you may have about choosing this kind of program with like both degrees. And also, I am a mathematical scholar, so happy to answer any questions about scholarships or anything like that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Frias. I'm heading into my third year at Western University and into the Ivy HBA program. My pre-IB program was BMOS, Business Management and Organizational Studies, and I was doing an honors specialization in human resources. But because I'm going into Ivy, and that's just more relevant to the first 2 years. I'm happy to answer any questions, and my background also changes to say DM for notes. I'm happy to help anybody out.
Okay, so thank you for all of our panelists for introducing yourselves. So let's get into our first topic of discussion, choosing a university and a program. So before we start our questions, we kindly ask all panelists to keep their responses to around 2 minutes. So without further ado, let's go ahead with our first question. So our first question is, how did you choose your program? And we'll direct this question to Maya.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say I didn't have the most linear journey choosing my program. I initially came into Western for health sciences and pursuing the HBA, and I'm in computer science. I think that ultimately the way that I wanted to choose my program was based on my interests. I realized that I wasn't someone who, like, I was always very passionate about business from the start, but I also realized that I wasn't someone who wanted to just do business. I wanted to have a bit of a spike in something else. At the time, I thought it was health sciences, but when I got into the program, I had my eyes on computer science. So from there, it just became like, what classes did I enjoy upon getting to the university? But you can also take a look at that before getting there through exploring like the course syllabi and taking a look at all of the course details.
Cool. Thanks for sharing your response. I think it's really interesting how people change their path sometimes after getting into university. Okay, so our next question, next slide. Okay, our next question is, what are the pros and cons of your university and what made you ultimately pick this university over other ones? So for this question, we'll direct it to Michelle and Krish.
Yeah, so I think I'll start. For myself, for pros and cons, I think everyone probably knows the UBC campus is genuinely super beautiful. It's a great place to be in, and the school itself is pretty good with a lot of notable research programs and whatnot. For me, that was one of the big drawing points. For cons, I'd say being far away from home is something that's pretty hard for a lot of people. So before considering out of province options, I'd say to like evaluate how well you think you'd do out of province. And as well, being at such like a, I guess, top school, there's a lot of academic pressure around there. So the overall environment can often be a little bit competitive, especially in like my business and computer science programs. But I ended up choosing this university because they had a program that I really wanted to go into. And so I do think there's some value to picking program over school sometimes. And I don't really regret going there and pursuing a program that I really, really enjoy.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. To add on to Michelle's points, for me, I think some like pros and cons that I was considering when choosing my university, which was Waterloo. I think for the pros, I think everyone probably already knows this. It's pretty cliche to say, but I think Waterloo's co-op program is, I think, like first of all, the first drawing point for like anyone like looking towards it. It's just like the job opportunities and prospects there are definitely something to consider. And then given that I was like interested in computer science, Waterloo also has like one of the top computer science programs in the country. And then I think for me specifically, this double degree option also was really interesting to me, where I was able to kind of like explore my interest in both computer science and business. And then on top of that, like Waterloo's pipeline with like Silicon Valley in California was also like really interesting to me, because I do end up like want to like try my hand at working in the States in the future. So yeah, in terms of the cons, I am an incoming first year student, so I don't think there's not that much I could say about the cons so far. But you know, I think the social scene is one that is not known to be the best at Waterloo. I will I will keep you guys posted on how that goes. But yeah, that's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you for those responses. So we'll move on to our next question, which is, I'm just gonna say before we switch the slide. So were you always sure that you were going to choose this program / school? And do you guys have any advice for students who are struggling to decide? So for this question, we'll direct it to Alex, Ratisha, and Maylin.
Okay, cool. I'll start. And yeah, Krish is right. I have no friends at Waterloo, so very sad. I'm kidding. Anyways, okay. So first thing I'd say is that like I just sort of was not that sure, and if anyone feels unsure, hopefully they feel okay about that. It just means you have a lot of interests and like skills and stuff. So it's nothing to like feel terrible about. It just means that you'll probably do well in like a lot of places. If you're struggling, I kind of have 3 points to make. The first is to keep your options open. So kind of as Krish is unsure of what he wants to do exactly, but therefore choosing a program like CSBBA is good because it keeps your doors open, right? So you can switch into other programs. So don't go to a university or a program where you can't really like swap to other things that you might be more interested in later. The second is that you can look more into your careers and explore what kind of jobs people in your program will graduate into, or look closely at the courses and whatnot to help you make a better decision than just abstract like ideas in general. And then my final tip is, if you're really not sure, flip a coin and see if you're happy with what the coin lands on. So it's like, oh, should I do CS or business? oh, it's CS. Oh no, and then you'll know truly that you should be doing business. That's all I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I can add on. I was really not sure. I was not always sure I was going to go into what I went into. I actually had planned to go into physiotherapy or health science for the longest time. So I did all through high school, and then COVID happened, and I was still working in healthcare, and I realized it was really not what I wanted to do. I had previously been really interested in marine biology research, and I was encouraged in my couple of last years of high school to pursue it. And so that was the first time I had considered moving out of province. I grew up in Ontario, and then I, on a whim, essentially decided to apply over to the West Coast, mostly in BC and in California. I ultimately decided to Canada mostly for financial reasons, but I also had a really hard decision about where I wanted to go. I had won a really big scholarship at a smaller university in BC, and I ended up going to UBC, but I spent a lot of time deciding between the two, and ultimately I agree with mostly what Alex said. It's about keeping your options open, and I knew had I decided eventually that I wanted to go to that smaller university, it would be easier for me to apply from UBC to there than the other way back, because UBC's transfer process tends to be very competitive, especially within the science program. So that was a big thing for me. But yeah, I think if you're struggling about where to decide, another big thing that Alex mentioned, looking into the actual classes you'll have to take in that degree is really important, because you can take a biology degree or a computer science degree at different universities, and the required courses and the amount of elective space you have will be very different between each school.
Just to add on to that, I think like in the end, we don't have to stress too much, because I was stressing a lot between choosing McGill and UBC when I was like trying to select, because McGill had this program for computer science and biology, but I was like, oh, I kind of want to do this. But then the good thing about UBC for me that worked was that you get 1 year of like not selecting a major, so you kind of get to just explore and take whatever courses you want. And so I think that really helped me decide what I wanted to do. I would also like recommend, like, even when you go to the university, like join clubs, I would say, and like organizations that are kind of like in your field of interest, because there's a lot of like research projects you can take on through that, and roles you can play that can kind of help you decide even when you're already in a school.
And just adding on to what Ratisha was saying, it's a great idea to join clubs, because you can expand your opportunities to try different fields. Coming into Western, I think it was really awesome that they take your transfer credits. So coming from an IB school, as long as you score a certain level, you're able to use those transfer credits, and instead that opens up space to take electives in different faculties. So for me, I was able to explore courses beyond my designated program, like looking into biology and psychology. So that allows you to fulfill course requirements for other programs and potentially make that switch. So there's a lot of room for flexibility if you also pick a program that allows you to use your transfer credit.
Yeah, I think those are all really cool tips and tricks that you guys have all provided. So our next question is, I know Maya already touched upon this. So did you ever switch programs throughout your university's experience? So for this question, we'll have Carrie and Maya answer it. I guess we can start off with Carrie.
Sure. So originally when I went to Western in my first year, I went in for comp sci, but then I ended up switching to BMOS or business in my second year. And to be honest, the main reason I even went in for comp sci wasn't because I was interested or took it in high school. It was because I got a lot of like external pressure from my peers. My parents were like, even my friends, just being like, oh yeah, in comp sci there's a lot of it's like much easier to find a job coming out of university, which is definitely true to some extent. But I think that it's really important to go into what you're actually interested in. And for me, every time I had a comp sci course, I would like dread going to it. I remember bawling my eyes out when I had to do this like coding assignment because I just didn't understand what's going on. But what really helped me make the decision to switch programs was also reaching out to upper years and seeing what sort of like internship opportunities they had and how they enjoyed the courses they were taking in their upper years. And I think that that gives you honestly a more honest opinion on the program and like if that's a career that you're looking forward to doing. And so I would say my biggest tip is reaching out to upper years, especially if they're from your high school, there's like a really big pay it forward culture. So they'll be more than willing to help you out.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think the reaching out to upper years is a really great point. The fact that you guys are already here listening to this panel is a great sign. I mentioned before, but I did switch programs in my university experience. Opposite to Carrie, I switched into computer science at Western from health science. I guess I can explain my rationale a little bit. The original reason that I wanted to do health science and business was just because I never saw myself doing purely business with the dual degree at Western, and I just wanted kind of a background to continue some of the research I was already doing. And health science felt like it'd be easier to get like good research faculty members, mentors, and such. One issue that I ran into is that once I got into health sci, I realized I really did not like the assessment methods. So that's something to consider if like the learning style of your program works for you. What I realized when I was in health sci is that like every time there was an exam, I would study for all of my other courses. And then for my health sci requirements, I would leave like 2 days before the exam and just cram those because I wasn't really that interested in learning it, or I had like trouble absorbing it because of the course structure. So I did some exploring with a lot of my friends in other programs, a lot of chatting to peers in upper years, which I think is very important if you're ever considering switching programs. And I also talked to my academic counselor about the idea of switching to CS because I found myself really liking a lot of the math courses I was taking in first year. And yeah, I ended up making that change and I really love it so far.
Great, that was definitely really insightful. Thank you everyone for sharing. So now moving on to the next sector of our panel, we'll be asking about the admissions process. So our first question is, we just wanted to ask our panelists to list out any stats, EC, extracurriculars, marks that they had in high school and leading up to their application season. So for this question, we'll direct it to Annie and Roseanne.
Okay, so me and Roseanne are going to share some of our stats. So for marks, my average was around 97, I believe, and my extracurriculars mostly involved figure skating, which I've been doing since I was 4, and I don't think I did that many school-related extracurriculars, mostly just figure skating, but I did spend a lot of time doing that.
And for me, my average was also between a 97 and 98. As for extracurriculars, I had a lot of leadership positions in clubs. So I was like vice president for a lot of clubs. And I did a lot of sports outside of school. And I also had a part-time job. But I think the most important part were math competitions. Right? Yeah, because we're part of the math faculty in our school. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like doing things that kind of align with what you're applying to, I think would be really important. Our next question, what kind of extracurricular activities did you participate in high school? How do you think they factored into your application? And for this question, we'll direct it to Annie, Roseanne, Carrie, and Olivia.
Wait, which one?
Okay, extracurricular.
Oh, okay. So extracurriculars, again, I did figure skating, basically every day for many hours, and I think that factored into my application the most. I also did some school activities on the side, but they weren't very serious. I didn't take a lot of leadership positions like Roseanne, but yeah.
I kind of listed my extracurriculars out earlier, but to go in depth, I also did a lot of sports, and they're at the competitive level, and we won like provincial competition. So that looks really good on the AIF because there is a list section, but I think it's more important to get distinctions or honor rolls on the math competitions you write for Waterloo. Yeah.
I can go next. So in terms of extracurriculars, I played competitive volleyball for 6 or 7 years throughout high school as well. And then in terms of like youth organization, I was actually involved with Ignite.fair. So in my grade 11 or 12 year, I served as the co-chair. At school, I took on a couple leadership positions for our athletic council and our DECA club. So I think a lot of these different experiences across sports, like philanthropy, business as well allowed me to develop different lenses. So when it came to writing my supplementary applications, such as my AEO essays, I was able to talk about the depth as well as the breadth that I was able to cover through various leadership roles. And I would definitely say if you're looking to strengthen your application, don't worry so much about what you're doing. Focus more on how you can build an impact and if what you're doing is genuinely something you're interested in. I found myself being able to contribute more to a team environment like my school's athletic council because I was so passionate about the sports that we were able to provide, the opportunities coming out of COVID, and creating new ideas and initiatives for everyone to get involved. So definitely just pursue things you're passionate about, and you'll be able to demonstrate all your contributions in that way too.
Yeah, so sort of building off what Olivia said, I did play volleyball as well. I actually played with Olivia for a year or two. I was also president of our school magazine and an exec for DECA. And I think that the most important part, like Olivia said, is just joining extracurriculars that you're actually interested or passionate about because it makes like time go by so much faster. And honestly, with a lot of these like business applications, they don't really care what XECs you're putting on. They just care about like you showing that you had like leadership in the past. And a lot of, I think like a really common question they ask is like, please describe a time where you worked as a team and there was a conflict and how you resolved it. So just sort of having stories and experiences to draw on to answer these questions is like the most important part of joining these ECs, not necessarily what specific EC you're joining or exactly like what role you have in it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for going to deeper depth about how extracurriculars factor into your application decision. And for the final question of this sector, what is the average grade or academic performance expected from incoming students in the program you're enrolled in? And for this question, we'll have Michelle, Roseanne, and Krish.
Yeah, so to start for UBC, how UBC works is that for most programs, mine is one of the exceptions, you actually only get into your faculty first, which typically is around 92% to be considered. And then UBC as a school tends to place a certain degree of emphasis on your personal profile when they evaluate you. In addition to that process for the BUCS, so Business and Computer Science program that I'm in, you also do have to write an essay after accepting your initial UBC Sauder offer, just to be let into the program at your first year.
For Waterloo, I would say you'd need at least a 95 to be competitive for CS. But there is a graph that you guys can search online for engineering with the probabilities of your average and your probability of admission. I'm not sure if there's one for CS, but you could probably look for something like that as well.
Yeah, and then for like, I think to add on to that, it's like for Waterloo engineering, there's also like the whole like adjustment factor situation where it's like depending on what high school you went to, it's like you deduct a certain amount of marks from your average, and it's like because they see that some schools are like inflated more, some are like lessened, is like a 95% plus average like going into it is pretty like to stay competitive. That's what you want.
Okay, so thank you all for sharing your insights on your school's admissions process. So now we want to get to know a little bit more about your academic experiences now that you're in your post-secondary programs. So for our first question in this category, it's, are your classes more lecture-based or discussion-based? Did you feel that in-class content and assignments helped you prepare for your exams? So for these questions, we'll pose it to Ritisha and Emily.
I can go first. So for U of T, I'm sure if you guys have considered U of T as an option for post-secondary, you guys have probably heard that it's a lot more lecture-based and more focused on academics. So I'd say for Rotman, that's definitely true, especially compared to like other business programs, like Western has like their case-based classes, but U of T is definitely more lecture-based. But there are some electives that you can take that are called like first year seminars, where it's just purely discussion on whatever topic or whatever book that you're reading for that week of the class. So a lot of first years do tend to take those classes because it's like a lighter workload and it's also like easier. So there are like different types of classes that you can take. But yeah. And then for the second part of this question, I'd say it definitely depends on the professor and how well they've organized the course. But in general, for like first and second year courses, because they're like more like a lot of students take it in the first and second years, they're usually well organized. And so the in-class content and assignments do help prepare you for exams, and oftentimes they'll also be reflective of what's on like a midterm or any other assignment. So yeah.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I feel like in general at UBC, science classes are a bit more lecture based, while arts classes are a bit more discussion based. And I felt that like science classes were a little bit more organized in that sense. If you like tend to like learn from the lecture slides themselves. So it's very important that you go to class for some classes, and then like for other classes, it just depends because sometimes it's just more textbook based, and you don't really have to go to class. Like if you miss a class, you can still catch up and manage to do that. Um, and then for in-class content and assignments, I definitely feel like for courses that need a lot of practice, like computer science, doing more problems helps. Like even for math courses, that definitely helps. And then for other courses, I guess like it's more just a requirement that it's there, but it's not as necessary. But mostly like for science courses, I feel like in-class content and assignments do help you because you're just getting more practice out of that essentially instead of just like reading off of material.
Cool. I think that's really interesting to hear more about each of your guys' universities. So moving on to our next question. If we can move on to the next slide. Yep. So how did you guys make connections with professors and build relationships within your department? So for this question, we'll direct it to Malin and Fryan.
Yeah, I can start out. Ironically, I'm actually house sitting for one of my professors right now, who is now also my boss. But I think when it comes to professors, it's really important to, one, a good way in the first, especially in first and second year, is trying to get into classes with professors you might want to work with eventually or who are in fields that you're interested in. But it's also really important to treat professors like people. I think like idolizing them, like there's so many steps above you, kind of makes it an awkward situation sometimes. So I think learning to make conversation and asking questions about the class and specific questions about career, something that asking for advice is a lot more personable and it opens a lot more doors. And it can also be really good in your first and second year to get a sense of which professors have a large network, because it's kind of that idea of the first step in can really have a trickle down effect on who you get to meet in the future. So the professor I work for in my research work is very well connected throughout my school, both in research and in outreach and in education. So I actually, through him, have been able to get multiple different opportunities and met a lot of interesting people. So it's really about expanding your network in a mindful way, but also in a way that is genuine and coming from a place of genuine interest.
I just want to add on to that, saying that like sometimes it's very like daunting to like know how to approach a professor. So like the easiest way to like for them to get a first impression of you is like right after class, just go up to them and ask questions. Like even during breaks in class, just keep asking questions so they kind of remember your face. And then so that way, like when you go to office hours, like they'll know who you are, and that's like when you can kind of engage with them more. And then like another tip for like knowing what kind of research they do is just searching them up and like their websites, because they have links to like the research that they do. So just asking them questions about that, and like Malin said, like building networks.
Yeah, I 100% agree with pretty much everything that Maylin and Rich just said. They're absolutely right. And I feel like my answer is less university focused and honestly more just life advice. You just need to find ways to stand out to your professors. And honestly, the amazing thing about university, depending on your program and class, is sometimes the bar is set really low. So honestly, just when you enter class, leave class, being courteous enough to say good morning or to say have a great day or offering a hand. For example, I had a professor who had Parkinson's, so I believe it was Parkinson's, so their hands were always shaking. So I would ask them if they needed help with their slides and their mouse because they were having a lot of trouble during lectures. Like these professors are people too, and the more that you show yourself to them, the more you're going to stand out. Asking questions during break time, attending office hours, sending emails if you have any questions, participating in class and sitting in places where you can be well seen. These are very simple steps that you can take. And by doing them, like for example, you might even have a scenario where like Maylin, where your professor can write a recommendation for you or can recommend you or can even hire you directly. So absolutely never underestimate what having good impressions and being genuine and standing out can really do for you.
Yes, I definitely echo what Brian was saying. In addition, just because a class has ended doesn't mean that your connection with that professor needs to end as well. I would highly encourage you to stay in touch with the professors that you've had, whether it's the previous semester or the previous year. Keep updated with one another. And if there's a specific professor that you're looking to have write you a letter of recommendation in the future, be sure to let them know about what your career goals are, what your aspirations are. Get to know each other on a personal level, like what's already been said, and that way they really get to know who you are both inside and outside of the classroom to give you that holistic recommendation letter if that's something you're looking for.
Yeah, so thank you all for your responses. I think building relationships with your professors is extremely important, especially for like university and also in the long term. So definitely things to consider. Our next question is, have you ever participated in any internships, research projects, or study abroad programs, and how did they impact your experience? So for this question, we'll direct it to Kunal and Michelle.
Sure, so I can get started. I've been working a part-time job or an internship basically every day since I've been 16. So I definitely say it's important to get your name out there and work. I'll highlight two experiences in particular at TD Bank. Throughout my grade 12 year, I was part of the innovation team over at TD Lab based out of Kitchener-Waterloo. So a lot of ideation on new bank processes and new bank products. And then that job transitioned this summer where I switched departments entirely and started working on strategy for the contact center. So basically thinking about how a TD customer consumer experience could look like in fiscal 27. And I think in just those 4 months over this last summer, I've learned infinitely more than I learned in all of university. And that was just because of the incredible amount of people I was able to meet. Yeah, thank you, Maya. Thank you for the plug. I'll get into that in a second. But yeah, like I was able to meet such a wide variety of people that taught me everything I know today. And I definitely recommend to every single person to not waste their summers, right? Take advantage of the 4 months you have off, get involved with work. It doesn't have to necessarily be a corporate internship. Maybe it's a startup you want to get working on. Maybe it's a nonprofit you want to join. Do something with these 4 months that you have, and I'm sure it'll benefit you tremendously. And like Maya said, a shameless plug for both of us here is going into the next school year. Both of us will be campus ambassadors with TD as well as Western. So basically acting as a liaison between Western students and TD as a company. So if you want to learn more, just feel free to shoot us a message on the side, and we'd be more than happy to help you out.
Yeah, and for myself, I personally believe that obviously finding an internship and work experience is really important, but there's also other ways to make meaningful usage of your summers, like doing personal projects, which is what I really focused on for the last year. This year, however, I was really lucky to be able to land a position at Huawei on their UX team, in which I'm really happy that I also get to experience UX design, UX research, as well as some front-end engineering. So I'm able to work in an interdisciplinary role in an interdisciplinary team. And I think that internships in general just provide you a different type of perspective on your career and your choices. As someone in a dual degree program trying to figure out where I want to land, I think that doing an internship is the best way for you to truly understand whether or not a career path is right for you. And so I highly recommend seeking them out and using them to almost as leverage to figuring out what you want to do with your academic career as well as your future career, and narrowing down your options through work experience, and just trying to make the most out of the personal relationships you can make during that experience and the projects you can work on. Take pride in your work and take initiative at these internships as well.
Those are all super really interesting responses that you guys gave. I think it's really important for you guys to spend your time wisely, especially during the summer. So for our next question, what do you mostly do in your program? What do you like most about it, and what do you like the least? For these questions, we'll pose it to Jerry and Alex.
All right, so I'm in mechatronics engineering, which is a bit of a more jack of all trades engineering program where we do a lot of mechanical, a lot of computer, electrical, all that kind of stuff. So you get a bit of taste of everything. So then you see that in your courses as well. You get physics and chemistry and material courses, but you get a mix of circuits and programming and digital logic, everything you possibly want. So it's really nice to have this view of every single topic. So then you can see what topic do I actually like most, because in the future you'll have electives and you have your co-op positions, especially since you're at Waterloo. We get to alternate between study, co-op constantly. So you get to just figure out what do I like and go down that path. So we have a lot of projects that focus on this kind of stuff, like in 1A, so your first term at Waterloo for mechatronics engineering. The big project is a collaboration between our design course and the circuits course, or sorry, not circuits, our programming course, where we had to use a Lego EV3, which is okay, sure, it's a pretty basic robot, but they give you so much flexibility. You can use any other materials as long as you use like the core electronics. So you're allowed to 3D print and everything. So you get to do crazy stuff, even in this first year project. With I built a Roomba sort of floor scrubber that would drive around and navigate around your room. I've seen people build 3D printers using these really basic and, let's be honest, not very great EV3 parts. So yeah, you get so much flexibility. And also, aside from just course content, you have student teams and design teams. That's a big thing in engineering, especially if you're in the more mechanical or electrical or software side. These three things are super desirable in student teams. You got to pick up super valuable skills that employers love to see. And it's student teams, right? You have teams for every single kind of interest, like cars, drones, anything you can imagine. And even if there doesn't exist one, you can always start your own. And yeah, aside from that, you have your co-op experience, especially here at Waterloo, where you're constantly on co-op, constantly searching for jobs if you're not on co-op. There's just so much opportunity to explore all these different fields. I'm going down the more mechanical route. After last term, I worked at BlackBerry doing technical writing for their automotive real-time operating system. I realized, okay, software is maybe not necessarily what I like to do. So now I'm pivoting towards a more mechanical role. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that applies for us too, because software engineering at Waterloo is also in engineering. It's in engineering as well. So we have a lot of group projects as well. Something that engineering focuses on more than maybe math is these team activities and building those kind of skills as well. For software engineering specifically, it's a bit of a mix of the math and the engineering courses. So we have all of the core math courses, things like calculus or linear algebra, sorry. And then for EC, we have physics courses as well. So it's a bit of both. And that's kind of what our field is. As Jerry was saying, a lot of the program is studying and then applying for jobs. That's kind of what your life looks like. Things I like about it, I guess I like the cohorts that come with engineering at Waterloo. So basically you have the same courses with everyone and you're kind of stuck together for a long time, but that makes it easier to make friends or, stuff like that. And I also enjoy the team activities. If you don't like teamwork as much then or group work, then maybe avoid that. But what I don't really like about the program is we have a lot of quizzes and studying for quizzes and stuff. I prefer projects and whatnot more. It's not very fun to study. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for sharing. I think it's really good to hear about what you guys are doing both in an academic setting in your programs and also outside of that academic boundary. So now moving on to a topic that is really important to going into university, which is funding your education. So our first question is, could you share any scholarships that you applied for and would recommend students to explore? And we'll direct this question to Kunal, Olivia, and Krish.
Sure, I guess we can answer in the order that you listed out. The two big scholarships that I spent a lot of my time doing were the Western National Scholarship, which I was fortunate enough to win in a little bit. Also, I applied to the Loran Scholarship, where I was a semifinalist. Those two were very long applications and took up a ton of time. So unless you're very confident in yourself that you'll be able to go far, I would recommend applying to a number of the smaller scholarships, $1,500 scholarships. And the way to source those is there's a ton of different ways. First, you can go to websites. Like there's a website called Scholar Tree, which kind of has a massive directory of everything you can apply to. And one thing that people tend to forget to do is just find people who have already won scholarships, go to their LinkedIn, scroll down and see what awards they won. And you'll see that they'll list out dollar amounts. So by doing this and kind of making a list of a ton of people who you might look up to, some connections that you might have, you now have a master list that you can apply to. While I didn't end up actually doing this because I spent basically all of my time on school and just those two big scholarship applications, this is an option and something I definitely recommend and is much more likely that you win these, as well as some of the other scholarships, than just focus or put all your eggs into one basket like I did, which is honestly a regret that I had.
Yeah, I can go next. So similar to Kanal, I also applied for the Western National Scholarship. I actually heard about this through my school's guidance newsletter. So every Friday, our school had a series of scholarships that the school was either nominating students for or just was posting about. So I would say definitely stay involved, read those emails if that's something your school also offers. And in terms of those larger scholarships, you can reach out to upper years and ask them to, maybe take a look at your scholarship essay, see if they can give you any tips, talk to them about maybe how their interviews went, if they can help mock with you. So those types of opportunities are out there for you. You just have to reach out to people, and I'm sure you'll find people who are willing to help you out.
Yeah, so for me, like Kanal, I also did apply for like those like big eggs in one basket kind of scholarships. So like the Loran, I also applied for the Schulich Leader Scholarship, which is a scholarship that you have to be nominated for by your school, which I did end up receiving from McGill, but ended up turning down for Waterloo. What else? The TD Scholarship Community Leadership, and then a few of these smaller ones. In the end, I ended up getting, also there's one more thing to distinguish, which is like there are these scholarships, but then there's also like scholarships that are like school specific. So like Kunal and Olivia have like one, like the Western National Scholarship. That's a scholarship that's funded by like the school itself. And like for myself, like I won the University of Waterloo's Math National Scholarship, which is like a scholarship given by the Faculty of Math at Waterloo. And a tip I would give is like, honestly, like apply to scholarships, even if you don't think you'll end up getting them, like, especially if they're like for categories that you don't like see yourself as like selling it. Like, for example, like I never thought I was too gifted or talented at math. Like I never really did too well in the math contest that Waterloo hosted. But nonetheless, I ended up winning the scholarship. I'm sure it was for other reasons beyond just math, like my extracurriculars and stuff like that. But yeah, just like shoot your shot, apply to whatever you honestly want. Like don't feel restricted by like, your mind and thinking like, oh, you might not get this, because anything's possible. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. The next question is kind of like a follow-up to this question, which is, does your grade 12 average affect your scholarship prospects, and to what extent? We'll have the same people answer. So starting with Kunal, then Olivia and Krish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your grade 12 top six average is one of the most important things that goes into not just scholarships, but also admissions. I remember I was very stressed going into application season, so I put all of my time and effort into making sure that average was as high as possible. Lucky enough, I ended up with I think a 99.7 in high school, so I was fortunate enough that things came fairly natural with the scholarships and the university admissions. But this is the one objective measure that any scholarship committee or university committee has to judge you on. So try your best to get this average as high as possible. So if that means talking to your teachers after class and seeing if there's anything you can do for extra credit, and go to your teacher's office hours, see if there's anything you're struggling on. This is by far the most important thing, in my opinion, when it comes to distinguishing yourself. So please, please, please do not slack off when it comes to your grade 12 admissions average.
It's also important to note the distinction between various types of scholarships. So there's merit-based ones, which are dependent on they can be dependent on your grades and your extracurriculars. There's also financial-based ones. So those ones won't be solely based on your grades. Instead, it's on your financial situation. So don't be deterred if your average is not as high as you would like it to be, because there are other ways of also obtaining scholarship money. I'll pass it over to Krish.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think for scholarship applications, yeah, like definitely having your average up there is important. But I feel like for scholarship specifically, it's not like necessary to have like the craziest like average, because it's not like the most objective, like the strongest measure they're going to be using to evaluate like whether or not you deserve the scholarship, because it's like I feel like that's more so just like of a benchmark of like, okay, are your academics like good enough to kind of be considered? But beyond that, I feel like it is really dependent on like who they see you to be as a person. So like some of those essays that you're writing for those scholarships is really important, along with this kind of like personal profile you build of yourself through the extracurriculars that you talk about and stuff like that. I feel like it's certainly really, really valuable. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you to our three panelists for sharing all that information about finances. So now we'll move on to our last section, which is just about general advice. So we'll start off with our first question of what is the reality of university? So this is about getting sick, stress, being burnt out, responsibilities, and missing home if you're away. So we'll direct this question to Emily and Carrie.
So I guess I can start. So personally, I'm a commuter student, so I live at home, like in the GTA, and then I commute to U of T. And with that comes a lot of stress and like getting exhausted during the year, especially since like you would think like commuting is like sort of easy because you're like literally just sitting on a train, but there's a lot more added to that because like you have to wait for buses, wait for trains. Like if you miss it, then it's a whole thing. So if you're a commuter student or considering commuting, it's definitely something you have to take into consideration. Yeah, when choosing your university and when deciding between like living on campus or living near campus versus living at home. So I'd say like stress related to commuting is definitely something that's very real, at least for me. And then for getting sick and like being burnt out, I think for me, first year, like the transition between high school to university wasn't actually that bad, especially in comparison to some of my friends or like other peers in my program. But I do know that people do find it hard to transition because like in high school you have a lot of structure versus in university you have a lot of freedom, and with that freedom you have to like actually be responsible in choosing what you do with your time, and if you like allocate your time in a way that's not balanced or like not optimized for your academics or like finding internships or whatever, then you might feel stressed about that and meeting deadlines and so just stuff like that. And then yeah, in terms of like responsibilities, I'd say there's like different types. There's like your academic responsibilities, like you just have to make sure you're on top of your work, and that you are trying to get involved in your university and program, because ultimately like your connections, no matter like what field you're in or whatever you're studying, that's like definitely really important. And then some people might have like home responsibilities and like responsibilities for like jobs and extracurriculars. So that's something you guys will probably have to keep in mind and balance well when you guys are in university. But yeah, that being said, I feel like most people usually find their groove by the end of first year or even like the end of like their first semester, first year. So it's not something to be overly worried about.
Yeah, so for me, it's a little bit different because I live on campus in London, which is quite a whiles away from where my parents live. So I definitely got very homesick a lot, especially in first year. But thankfully in our day and age, there's FaceTime, so I call them like every day. Nothing to be embarrassed about if you miss your parents. And I would say in terms of like getting sick and stressed, that's also very common, unfortunately, in university. And what I would say about that is to really remember that like self-care is productivity as well. So like you can't be productive if you don't feel like 100% physically okay or like mentally okay first. And you'll like be so much more productive if you're like feeling your best, and you'll be able to like get whatever studying you need to get done so much quicker. And I think the last thing I would say about this is to just really lean on your friends and like your roommates if you have any, because everyone is going through the same thing. You're never alone. We're all just figuring it out as we go. So just talking to your friends, or like if you're really stressed out, it really helps as well.
Okay, thanks for sharing. Our next question is it's about the overall difference between high school and university. So this concerns workload changes, social life, etc. So for this question, we'll pose it to Roseanne and Brian.
Entering university as a freshman, initially I was very intimidated, but it's definitely not as bad as people make it out to be. I think the main difference is just that you're a lot more independent and you're responsible for like all your academics and your home life as well. In high school, I think a lot of teachers kind of like help you with every step in the way. They really check in on you and make sure that you're doing okay. But in university, it's your responsibility to make sure that you don't fall behind in class and that like you understand what's going on in the course. As for social life, I think if you put in the effort to meet people, then you will make a lot of friends, as long as you try to like there's a lot of clubs that you could go to connect, and yeah, just like things like that.
So for anyone going to Western, just letting you know, in my personal experience, my first week there, the orientation week, scared the crap out of me. I'd already heard a lot of things about how Western's a party school, and you're gonna go to a lot of parties there. And literally the first day, first hour after I got unpacked, I was invited somewhere where there were people smoking, walking around in clothes that you can't wear in high school, and you can probably infer a few other things. So I was right off the bat, I was like really scared that that is the kind of environment that I was going to be in. And the funny thing is, we seems to cater to people who are already outgoing with concerts and drag shows and stuff like that, which I find funny because I feel like you would want to do the opposite way, to cater to people who are more introverted. But that being said, even though I was really scared because of this first week, that's just Frosh Week. And if you like that, then good, you can look forward to that. But there's plenty of opportunities to make friends there doing other activities or in classes. And if concerts and partying is not your thing, that's fine. You just be prepared as a Western student to constantly be asked about how crazy the parties are there, and having to disappoint your friends by saying that you don't go to them. But that's the kind of lifestyle choices that you make. I feel like not much has to change with you socially. It's up to your discretion what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And in terms of freedom, and just like Roseanne was saying, and also the Emily and Carrie, you don't have constant tests the way it is in high school. Mostly you just have a few very large exams, sometimes only like 1, 2, or 3. And so make sure you're pacing yourself, because if you mess up just one, I've had friends mess up an exam and they just drop the whole course because it's too much to make up. So really, the pressure is a lot more for your exams in university. So make sure you're pacing yourself. But yeah.
Awesome. So thanks for sharing about that. We'll move on to our next question. So what is the typical day in the life as a student in your program, and how would you describe the overall culture at your program and school? For this question, we'll direct it to Mylin.
This question is really interesting because as somebody who's mostly in the biology faculty, I think the day in the life of a student depends really heavily on how they've decided to structure their career and also where they plan on going past undergrad. Biology and a lot of science degrees are very general, and a lot of people have different ideas of where they want to go after. So somebody who might be spending a lot of their free time doing research projects, or may have more free time just in general, depending on how they've decided to do so. At UBC, it's really common for people to do 5 or 6 years for their undergrad. The culture at UBC can be a little bit different than I find on the East Coast, surrounding how much of a rush people feel they are in to finish their undergrad. People here tend to also value not only work-life balance, but also in the essence of getting more work experience without having to take time off and doing co-op. So a lot of people work part-time. Vancouver is also a very expensive city to live in. So a lot of people are working part-time and not being able to take full course loads for financial reasons. So that's something I think is really something to keep in mind, that undergrad is a different journey for everybody and doesn't have to look the same for each person. In terms of culture at my program in school, I find, because I'm on the ecology side of the biology program, that there's a lot of community, which is really nice. A lot of my personal friends are not within similar fields as me, but my friends who I've made through classes and through work and through outreach work have become a real safety net for me, and people who I've very deeply related with. I spend a lot of time on field work, so I spend a lot of time away from my friends in the summer, traveling in remote places without internet access, and it's something that I really do love and is a huge part of why I've stayed in my career, but it is very disengaging in other ways. So finding people who relate to you, I think, is really important. And sometimes that means having to get out of your shell and making friends and tapping shoulders in classes with people and just trying to chat up people to find people who you can find community in, which I think is a huge part about self-care and productivity, like one of the other speakers was talking about earlier.
And that's an interesting perspective you bring up. Okay, so next question is, was there a lot of support available to aid the transition as a freshman? And we'll direct this to Annie.
Yeah, so I believe at Waterloo, at least, there was a lot of help to aid the transition. I really enjoyed orientation week. It's still probably the best week at Waterloo, in my opinion. I think everyone at that time is just like open to make friends. And like, honestly, I think I'm a little bit introverted. I'm more on that side, but orientation made it very easy to meet new people. And if you ever have like questions, you can easily just reach out to your friends. And I think, yeah, orientation definitely helped for me. And also, if there is support that you need, I'm sure you can find it. On University of Waterloo, there's a lot of websites for various things, such as if you need therapy, I'm pretty sure it's actually free, and other things too. But yeah, overall, if you need help, don't be scared to reach out to the university or even friends that you meet at the beginning.
Cool. Okay, we'll move on to our final question. Have you ever been involved in any extracurricular activities or clubs on campus? And how has that impacted your university life? We'll direct this to Jerry and Michelle.
Yeah, so this is the thing I've actually spent more free time on than I'd say possibly even studying. Like, I'm on a student team right now, electromobility, where we build personal electric vehicles like e-bikes, e-skateboards and one wheels and that kind of thing. And I'm on the e-bike team as sort of the unofficial mechanical lead. And for that, we spend so much time, like, we're building a bike completely from scratch, like the frame, the batteries from scratch, everything's from scratch. So you need to spend a lot of time designing, considering like how a bike is actually built. There's a whole bunch of thinking behind it. And then not only are you spending time designing it, like I designed the battery enclosure and I assembled the battery and I helped build the frame itself. You spend like so much time doing this. Like I remember 7 hours in the engineering buildings once, just like grinding tubes, cutting them down to assemble for the frame and set it up for welding. But it is a lot of fun. You get to meet so many people. And like when you're working there, it's like you're just chilling with basically your friends. You're working together on your project. And it's really fun. You get to meet so much people. Yeah.
For my side, while I do think joining academic clubs is super important, This year, I'm actually a part of my school's computer science student association. But other than that, I think joining clubs that you have personal interests in is also super, super important. For me, last year, I was super homesick, and for a while, I really was considering transferring to a school closer to home. But one of the big things that really helped me sort of make more of my experience was joining my school's esports club. And so through that, I was able to work with a lot of really cool people and run insane projects. So I got to meet like Travis Gafford, Vinny Hacker, and run like a lot of cool events based in esports. And so I think that doing things that you are equally as passionate about at a club level in university is also super, super rewarding. And I highly recommend it, especially if you're interested in any more niche subjects, to meet people that share the same passions and want to work with you to create cool events, in my case, in the collegiate esports scene.
Yeah, I kind of want to add on to that. Like I think it's very important, like Michelle said, to like do something that is in your passion and not necessarily like academic. Like the first year, in my first year, I took a bunch of courses and I was kind of like burnt out. So what was important for me was like doing something that kind of helps release that stress. So I kind of joined this like competitive Bollywood fusion dance team, and we were actually able to like go to the States to compete and stuff. So that was like pretty cool. But it was also like really efficient for kind of like helping de-stress, because like for me, like through dance or like through any kind of like physical exercise, like all it was like that's what prevented me from like burning out from like constantly studying. And sometimes you need like that balance so you're not always like thinking about academics.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing. Definitely very, very important and valuable experiences for us to hear about. So before we conclude the open session, we have a video that Emily sent to us. Emily is going into her second year at McMaster Honors Life Science, and she sent us a video to share because she was not able to make it here today. So we'll just share that right now. Oh, Meili, make sure you're sharing with sound. If you go to the Zoom settings before you start sharing, there's an audio to share audio. There's an option to share audio.
One second, let me look for that.
Sorry?
Let me look for that option.
It should be on the drop-down menu on the top.
I think I got it now.
Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Xiang. I'm currently a student at McMaster University. I'm currently studying Honors Life Sciences and I'll be going into my second year in the fall. I'll be graduating in 2026, and unfortunately I cannot be joining you guys at the event today because I am currently overseas. But here is a short video for you to get to know McMaster. I decided to pursue life sciences because I've always loved science as a kid throughout elementary school and high school, and I really enjoyed the science courses in grade 12 of high school. But another reason why I decided to pursue life sciences is that it really offers for a broad spectrum of things to do after you graduate. For example, I know people who went and did med school, pharmacy, optometry. I know a person who did a master's program overseas. I know someone who eventually did a PhD. And I even know people who went and did a job or did a total career switch from science to law or science to business. And they were only able to do those things because life sciences keeps your options open. And at the time when I chose my program, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do in the way beyond future. So I wanted to keep my options open, and that's why I chose life sciences. So you heard me talk about my high school briefly in the last clip, but now I'm going to talk more in detail about my high school experience. So for extracurriculars in high school, I was a part of 4 clubs in grade 12. I was president of 3 of them, but not all of them were science related. Actually, only one of them were science related, and it was like a volunteer situation, but the other ones were all just for fun. And then as for outside of school extracurriculars, I did competitive dancing at my dance studio, and I also volunteered at a neuroscience nonprofit. And then as for my academic performance, I did all 3 sciences. So I did chemistry, biology, physics, and then I took advanced functions and calculus and vectors as well. I did not take stats in grade 12, but I do recommend that you do because it's pretty helpful if you want to pursue something in the sciences, not just life sciences. I think health sciences, medical science as well. They're all pretty, they all take stats for some reason in second year, so I do recommend stats. And yeah, the admission average is around, I think, if it has not changed this year, it was, at least for my year, high 80s to low to mid 90s ish, and my average was around low to mid 90s. So yeah, so now that we're done talking about my high school life, we can talk all about my university life. So I'm headed towards second year, which means I just finished first year, so all those first year memories are so fresh in my head, and I'm going to tell you all about it. So first thing on the agenda we have is clubs. So for clubs, I actually only joined 1 club in first year, and it is a show choir club. So we did like singing and dancing. So it has nothing to do with science, and that is perfectly okay. I think my goal for joining clubs in first year was to just join something that I loved and not something that I am using for my resume. And I think that is the mindset to go when you're looking for a club to join, because McMaster has over 100 clubs, maybe even 200. During club fair, it is crazy. There's so many clubs. There's anything from sports to technology to so much science. You can literally find a club for any spectrum of science. And there's also a bunch of arts clubs like instruments, band, choir, or show choir, or anything like that. There's also like painting and crafts. And there's even a K-pop club, which I was actually temporarily a member for, and it was pretty fun. So yeah, I do recommend. So next on our agenda is dorms. I lived in a dorm in first year. I lived in PGCLL, which stands for Peter George Center for Living and Learning. Long name, I know, but it is actually the newest dorm building on campus. It was built in 2019, and then COVID hit. So it was really, really new and really, really clean because not many people have lived in it. And yes, the reality of dorms is that you're going to get into disagreements with your roommate. You're going to hear those loud music playing at 1 or 2 a.m. when someone is blasting it through the speakers next to you. But it's all part of the experience. And I personally loved it. I think it was pretty awesome. And yeah, for lectures, so lectures are totally different from high school like classrooms. In high school, I know you guys have just 30 people in a class and the teacher talks. In university, however, it is a whole lecture hall with over 300 people, and the lecture hall kind of looks like a movie theater. It's kind of like rows of people, and then it gets like taller and taller towards the back. And then there's like a big screen with a slideshow, and then the professor is in the front and they're lecturing, they're talking, and they're like clicking through the slides and stuff, and you're just taking notes. But there is something kind of like a classroom, like in high school classrooms, in university, which is tutorials, and that is something you take for your lectures. And those are kind of like high school because those are kind of smaller. They're 20 people, usually 30-ish, and then the TA takes, they take attendance there, and then you get called on and stuff. That's kind of like high school-ish, but lectures are not at all like the high school classroom, so be prepared. As for sickness and stress, so I did get sick in first year twice, and yes, it did feel lonely because I couldn't go home because I didn't want to infect my parents. And yes, you do feel kind of sad sometimes because your mom's not there to cook you a hot bowl of soup. But my advice for you is to just take it easy, take it slow, ask for extensions if you're sick, because the university is usually pretty accommodating for those things. And yeah, just take it easy. And as for stress, yes, you're going to get stressed during the year. There are many times during the year where there's either like a bunch of things due or just a bunch of exams to do. And yes, I got stressed, and yes, everybody gets stressed. But my advice for you is to just take it easy again, take it slow, one thing at a time. You'll never get anything done if you try to do like 10 things at once. So my advice for you is to, personally, I like to use a calendar, just list out everything I need to do today, or make like a to-do list for today or something like that, so that I can have everything organized and laid out. So I really do recommend organizing everything instead of trying to finish everything at once. And yeah. So one more thing I would like to add is that McMaster is actually a visually really pretty school. We have so many different cherry blossom trees and fruit trees and all kinds of maple leaf trees during the fall. So if you ever get a chance to tour McMaster, feel free to come at any time because it is so beautiful on campus. I love walking around. It really keeps my spirits up during the year. And yeah, so thank you so much for listening to this video. I am so sorry it cannot be there because I am currently on vacation, but if you have any other questions about McMaster, I am more than happy to answer them. Just message me on Instagram. My handle is Emily Xia, so my name, Emily Xia, with an extra A. And yeah, thank you so much and have a great day. Bye!
Awesome. Okay, so now moving on to the next sector of our event. First of all, thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing so much of their experience and insight about this process. I'm sure we definitely learned something new about this challenging application process. Now it's time for us to transition into some breakout rooms where attendees, you guys will be able to ask any questions you may still have, whether you want to drop them in the chat and we'll ask them, or you want to just ask the panelists yourself, anything would work. I'll be opening the breakout rooms in a minute, and then our amazing panelists will be separated into breakout rooms sorted by program, which will be shown on the screen. Breakout rooms will be open up until around 4:55. So up until then, please, we really encourage you to ask any questions that you might have. So the breakout rooms are now open. We encourage all the panelists and attendees to go to the breakout rooms that they would like to. Hello, everyone. So in the business and economics breakout room, Matthew and I will be your MCs. So we'll go through a list of questions that we have prepared beforehand. But if anybody has any personal questions they would like to ask, please drop them in the chat and we will ask them for you. So Matthew, if you want to get started.
Okay, Kunal. I started messaging in the chat, and that's okay. So our first question is, what extracurricular activities do you recommend for business/economic applicants during high school?
I can go first. So I don't believe there's a standard set of extracurriculars that you should participate in throughout high school. But if you are leaning toward more business-oriented ones, there's DECA, which a lot of schools have their own chapters, and so you can get involved by being a competitor on the oral side or the written side. And then at my school, we also had the opportunity to take on more leadership positions by becoming a trainer and taking on roles on the executive team. So definitely, if you want to continue your involvement with business clubs, you can, increase your leadership potential through that.
I would like to recommend personally Junior Achievement. That's a program that I did in high school. It's an amazing one. If you don't know what it is, it's basically an organization where you get together with a group of high school students and you get to start your own business for a year and you get to run for executive positions. So you can be the president, or you could also just be a member in one of the departments or a vice president in one of the departments. I think the secret to really making JA valuable is not only becoming an exec, but also you can keep in touch with your mentors in that program. And that is exactly what I did. And I actually, because I stayed in touch with one of my mentors, I was able to leverage that relationship to get me a corporate HR job. So I think that that's where the true value lies. And Junior Achievement is the name of the program if you're interested.
Yeah, I want to just kind of echo what Olivia said, is that there's no set framework. There's nothing you have to do in particular, as long as it's something you're interested in. So for example, my school stopped offering DECA in my grade 10, 11, and 12 year. So I didn't actually even get admitted into DECA in grade 9. And so I never actually touched it my entire high school life. I spent most of my time doing things like Model UN, which is more political science based, I guess. And have not taken a single poli-sci class in university, but it did still help me get there. So I'm just saying, do something you're passionate about, do something you see yourself not going crazy doing for the entirety of your day. And you should be fine as long as you're able to talk about your experiences.
Yeah, I'd say also like
Sorry, go ahead.
getting involved in the community through like student organizations like Ignite.fair probably helps. It's just another leadership experience you're able to talk about when you're writing about your experiences for university, and also just like doing your interviews for university admissions and also in the future when you apply for jobs or internships or anything of the sort.
Yeah, sort of echoing what everyone already said. There isn't exactly a specific set of clubs you should join. But I think that for DECA at least, or I guess some more like HOSA, I think is like the science equivalent, where you're sort of presenting. It's helpful in the sense like if you want to do a career in something like consulting where you have to present a lot or there's like a lot of meetings, it helps you develop a lot of soft skills that are important, such as like learning how to present or learning how to communicate better. So in that sense, I think joining clubs like DECA is really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So I think a kind of follow-up question to that, just skipping around a bit. Are there any business related competitions or events that you maybe recommend participating in?
I can jump in. So in high school, again, you have your, if you're joining DECA, there's the regionals, provincials, and international quiz competition. So you can go through the different levels by just progressing. You know, you complete an MC exam, so a multiple choice exam, and you have to score like within certain range for your case, your role play, and that's how you progress to the next level. But there's also lots of opportunities in university to get involved in case competitions. So don't feel that, oh, you need to do all these case competitions in high school in order to do well in university. That's definitely not the case. I know at Western, we've got a huge club culture with the various business clubs going on. So there's never a shortage of opportunity in university as well. I can pass it to Kunal if you want to say anything.
Yeah, so during my high school life in grade 11, I think it was, DECA kind of had like a temporary stoppage because of some copyright rules, and another club called JOT came in place. Again, I was never really an exec or anything like that on JOT. I did a couple of their competitions, which told me that, hey, these are some cool problems that I'd like to potentially solve as a career. So I guess that helps solidify why I wanted to do business a little bit, but ultimately, like I mentioned before, um, any admissions committee doesn't really care if your experience is in business as long as your experience is in something. Um, so, you know, it's always a plus to do FBLA, to do DECA, stuff like that, to just really tell yourself that you want to do business, but it's not a mandatory by any means by any stretch of the imagination, I would say.
Okay, thank you. We have a question in the chat that asks, how can one land an internship as a high school student? If any of you entered in high school, how was your experience?
Sure, I guess I can start. So I interned at a couple different places in high school. I'll start with the first one. It was a small kind of media company based out of Brampton, Ontario, which is where I'm from. And I think the key to landing an internship in high school is just start off with a startup, because a large corporation won't really have the capacity to take you on. And so sometimes if you have to work unpaid, you can do stuff like that. So I worked at a media company on a vaccination campaign that was funded completely by the government. So they had no problems with capacity. And I think being resourceful and finding opportunities locally is helpful. Then I went on to work at a charity. Again, very similar type of situation. I worked not because I wanted to be part of this massive corporation, but because I wanted to make a change in my community. So I was giving youth opportunities when it kind of like ignite.fair, like youth, marginalized communities, new immigrants opportunities in Canada. And all of that experience, I was able to leverage the connections there to get to TD when I worked in innovation, specifically product. That was a very special circumstance where the charity was doing a partnership with TD, and so I was able to network that way. But this isn't something that is usually very common. So I would say in terms of internships in high school, it's not it's not expected that you do them. It's a great bonus that if you have them. But definitely if you can't find one, no worries at all. Focus on volunteering, focus on taking leadership in your community. And if you're worried about finances, there's a ton of jobs you can work as a high school student. It doesn't have to start all glamorous. I was working pushing carts for 6 months at Metro, the grocery store. And I still think to this day that was the job where, I was worked the hardest because it was such physical demanding work. And like everyone needs something like that. So again, it's always a great starting point to just go to a random plaza, print out your resumes, and just start handing them out, and someone will take a shot on you. And that's where it all starts.
Okay, so thank you for that. That's definitely very important. Part-time jobs is a good lead-in to get you some starting experience. If nobody else wants to join in, we'll jump in, we'll move on to the next question. How do you go about choosing a specialization? I know that I'm pretty sure Western can apply for a dual degree. I'm not sure how it works though. And I know that Emily has an accounting specialization, I'm pretty sure. So maybe if some of you could just walk us through the process of how it works in your school, and like if you have any personal experiences going through it.
I can start us off. So at Western, if you're planning to go into Ivy, for your first 2 years, you can study whatever you'd like. So they have something called the 2+2 structure. So the first 2 years, you study whatever you want. And then the next 2 years, you go into Ivy. But for those who are planning to pursue the dual degree, you stay back for typically a 5th year. So for example, I was considering the CS Ivy dual degree. So that would mean in your first 2 years, you study computer science. In your third year, you do full Ivy, so just business. In your 4th year and 5th year, it's a combination of both CS and business. So I guess half the time you're taking business, half the time you're taking CS. And that's the same kind of thing for the other opportunities. Like if you want to pursue an economics and an Ivy degree, you can complete that in 5 years. Some specializations like law, Ivy also offers a law and a JD. So it's JD is law, JD and Ivy degree, and that's completed in 6 years. So depending on what you're looking for, it can range between 5 to 6 years for a dual degree, and you just have to make sure you take the required courses to be eligible and have the grades to apply, because you actually apply for the dual degree at the end of your 3rd year when you're in Ivy.
Yeah, sort of just adding on. At Western, every year at the end of the year, you complete this intent to register form, and essentially that's just saying what program or specialization you want to go into for the next year. And basically everyone is admitted if you just meet the minimum requirements like the grades to move on to the next module. And for me, before Ivy, I was specializing in accounting. And I chose this specialization just because, surprisingly, I actually really enjoyed accounting and the accounting courses I took. So that was just my reason for choosing that.
Yeah, and then I guess in terms of U of T, so for the first year, it's a general program. So you just take certain required courses for Rotman, and then you have to achieve a certain mark in those courses to be able to go to second year and go on and decide your specialist. Um, so yeah, you just have to get like the required marks. And I think the three more elective type courses are accounting, financial markets, and marketing. And so those three courses really do give you like a sneak peek or a look into the future specializations that we have at Rotman, which are finance and econ, accounting, and management. And so yeah, by the end of first year, once you've finished all your requirements, you're allowed to choose your specialization for the next 3 years. And so I think the most popular one is management, mostly because it's the most flexible, and you're able to focus in different things. So there's like a focus in strategy or focus in human resources. And so if you're more interested in that, then you're able to do like choose that specialization. Whereas like finance and econ and accounting, it's obviously more specialized. And it's harder to switch out once you or yeah, harder to switch out once you start doing those required courses as part of those specializations. But yeah, for how I chose my specialization, I really enjoyed my accounting courses both in high school and university. So I thought that it would be a good idea for me to continue doing that and pursue a CPA designation in the future.
Sorry, I actually have a follow-up question for Emily regarding U of T. I was wondering if U of T, Rotman does like dual degrees across different colleges at U of T.
Yeah, I think um it's not like a dual degree. It's more like you can do like two majors or like a specialization and a minor. I think it works differently, like U of T works differently in that way. But it's just based on the number of credits you complete in a certain type of course. So like if you want to get an econ minor, you have to do like 4 credits worth of courses in econ. So yeah. I know like some people who are more interested in CS, they do like a specialization in management or finance and also do a minor in CS. So you sort of get a dual degree in that way. But yeah.
I see. Thank you.
Navjot, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, messaged me another question. He asked, how did you go about finding scholarships?
I guess I can start with that. So I feel like in general there are two types of scholarships. There's ones that are or three types actually. There's ones that are like academic merit based, there's ones that are financial need based, and then there's ones that you just apply to. So like the ones that are more like academic, it's usually like based on your grades, like your top 6 average when you finish high school, and it's usually like offered by the university automatically. So for me, I was able to get the University of Toronto Scholarship Program or scholarship based on my grades when I finished high school. And then for the financial need ones, that's also usually given out by the university based on their information of you and you're entering university with regards to your household income and your like financial situation. And then there's ones that you apply to that are not affiliated with your university. And those you just have to find online or through your guidance counselors. But like yeah, I think the people who answer the scholarship questions would probably be a better source to ask this question to. But yeah.
Yeah, I think she covered it. Honestly, that's a pretty exhaustive way of answering that question.
Okay, in that case, we can move on to the next question. I know that scholarships was something we did cover in the main room as well. So the next question is, are there any research opportunities or business-related projects that students can get involved in, whether that's like near the application season during high school or like during your first few university years?
Sure, I can get started with this one. I do have to drop right after this question, though. Sorry about that. So just to clarify, just any business-related projects that people can get involved with.
Yeah.
So when you get to university, at least this is the case at Western. I'm not exactly sure how it is everywhere else, but there's just a ton of clubs on campus. So while I'll name one, while I wasn't particularly involved in this, there's a club called the Western Investment Club at Ivy, or I guess at Western, where they have their own fund. So I think it's about $300,000 now, maybe it dropped to $200,000, where student analysts basically look through the market, find stocks that they want to invest in, and then put that money to actual use. So it's a project that you can work on. It's real money that you can manage, but with very little stake for yourself because it's not money you're actually losing. There's also a ton of different consulting clubs on campus that actually go and find real startups that need help and then act kind of as a consultant for free. So it gives you experience. Obviously, you won't get paid for it as you would if it's a job, but it gives you the experience and exposure you need to realize if consulting's for you and to realize if that's something you actually want to pursue. But yeah, those are two ways I would say you could get involved, at least at Western. Again, not too familiar with how it is at the rest of the universities.
I can add on one more thing for Western. In terms of research, there's something called the Scholars Elective Program, and every year they admit around 50 students who are graduating from grade 12 and going into first year. So if research is something you're looking into doing, you can try to get into that program, and then starting your second year, you actually complete a full year research project with a prof. So you can reach out to a prof in any faculty and set up a meeting, let them know you're interested in working with them, and then go from there. I think Carrie wanted to add on as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add, there's also this club at Ivy called the Global Research and Consulting Group, I think. It's like GRC. And basically, as a first or second year, you can actually get involved in some like pro bono consulting projects as like an analyst. And then there's usually a senior project lead who would be someone in Ivy that's like sort of leading you. So if you want to get involved in some like pro bono projects, that's also a good club to check out.
Yeah, and then in terms of U of T, we have this first year course called RSM 100. It's like Intro to Management or something like that. So it's a required course for all first year students, and it basically culminates in a case study that all first year students have to do. So if that's something you're interested in, yeah, that's something that happens in first year for U of T. And then in general, there's also like case competitions that you can join. And like I mentioned before, U of T has a bunch of different like seminar and research courses for first year. So if you're planning on coming to U of T, you can definitely think of enrolling into those as electives.
Okay, thank you for those responses. I'm not sure if this will be the last question because it is nearing 4:50, but explain, is there an importance of networking for economics/business majors, and how have you built your professional network within the field?
I think networking, especially for business, is really important because business is all about who you know. And they do help you, like internal referrals are a really big thing for getting internship positions or like just any job positions. And when you network, they usually at the end refer you to other people that you can network with. So you sort of like expand your network in that way. And the way that I started was just reaching out to people that I saw that were from Western that had positions that I was interested in. And honestly, everyone at Western, especially at like Ivy, it's because it's such a like close-knit community. They're all super willing to help. So I would say start with reaching out to people from the university or whatever high school that you go to, because they're more likely to respond. And then from there, you can sort of build your network out.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. Sorry, Brian, you go first.
Well, honestly, I feel like everyone's saying everything already, but I just feel bad because I wasn't talking. But if I could just offer some like advice, like Carrie, you actually did say it, but I guess I'll emphasize it. Like at the end of every single networking session that you have, whether it's in person or a coffee chat that you set up, a key thing to easily get like more people to contact you is just to ask them at the end, who else can I talk to in your network that would be able to help me? And then from there, it just spirals out because you talk to the people that they recommend, and then you can talk to the people that they recommend, and it goes on and so forth. And so that is I guess a hack that someone else passed down to me that is kind of a way that you can easily find contacts through that way. And then also, I don't know if Emily, you were going to say this, but getting used to cold emailing people, which is just sending an email out of the blue, just to somebody within a company. Usually, it's best to do it for smaller companies because they're more likely to reach back out to you. But doing it for any company at all, just sending those emails out, you never know who's going to respond to you. So, and then you can honestly get opportunities from there. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Brian and Carrie have said. I'd also say like this is sort of like on the more practical and realistic side, but a lot of companies have recruiting events that you can go to. So those are usually a really good way to get your first like foot in the door and talk to reps in a more like professional setting, so you don't have to like reach out to them on LinkedIn first, and it's a lot less intimidating that way because it's almost like a warmer lead than like just cold emailing or cold messaging someone. So yeah, I think that's pretty important, and you should probably also really be in tune with the recruiting cycles of like different industries. So like there's different recruiting cycles for like accounting, finance, comp sci, and they're all pretty different. So you just have to be aware of that when you're planning for your year or your semester. Great. Oh, sorry, Olivia, did you wanna?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. So Emily mentioned recruiting events, also case competitions and hackathons. A lot of the time, the sponsors are there and they're willing to talk to the competitors. So definitely use that as an opportunity to, get to know the people who work in that company, what they're potentially looking for in new hires. And that way you can also continue to reach out to them even after the event to see if they have opportunities open that you might be interested in.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I have more of a personal question tied with like another question that's more generic, but how do you go about if a student wanted to pursue a degree in like the first 2 years before before IB that's completely unrelated to business itself? So for example, I'm really interested in music. I'm thinking about trying to do something with music and business. So would it be really obscure and random to like do like a dual degree with music and IB?
Not obscure at all. I actually have a friend who did that.
Oh.
She's entering her first year of IB this year. She's doing the honor specialization in music. I think she's specialized in violin, but there's definitely a lot of different things you could study. You could study like political science, you study music, or you're interested in arts, like anything, engineering. There's lots of opportunities for you to combine your interest with business. So don't feel like it's too obscure.
Thank you. Another question that's like more general that other people might also want to hear about is any tips that you guys have for the AEO application. Again, it's more geared towards the Western students, but yeah.
Tips would just be putting yourself out there, especially in first year, and trying to apply for those exec positions on clubs, because a big part of the AO application is essentially the whole thing actually is they just want to see your leadership experience. And I think it was 2 main activities where you showed leadership, and then there's like a few like smaller ones which are just jot notes. So I feel like applying to as many like exec positions as you can, because in first year it's I will say it's a little more difficult to get those positions. So applying to more is would like help increase the chances to get one.
Okay, great. If nobody has anything to add, if you do, just interrupt me. But I think because we're nearing the end of the event time, I'm gonna close the breakout rooms. Thank you guys so much for sharing and answering questions.
Record this. There we go. Okay, so just to redo introductions again, I'm Grace. I'm a External Affairs Director at ignite.fair, and I will be emceeing this breakout room.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a sponsorships coordinator for ignite.fair, and I'll be emceeing this breakout room too.
Okay, if our panelists can introduce themselves again.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So my name is Krish. I am an incoming first-year student at the University of Waterloo for computer science and business. And yeah.
And I'm Michelle, and I'm going into my second year in the Business and Computer Science Combined Degree Program at UBC.
Cool. Okay, so how this breakout room is going to go is that on the MC side, we have a list of questions that we can ask if the attendees don't have any. And then attendees, Eric and Aricia, if you guys have any questions, you can put them either in the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature, and then you can unmute and then ask your own question if you'd like. So with that being said, if attendees have any questions, you can start inputting them in the chat. But I guess for now, we will start with our own questions. Sarah, if you'd like to start off with a question, you can feel free to do that.
Okay. So how is the workload as a double degree student, and like on average, how many hours a day are dedicated to studying?
I think probably I'll take this since Krish, you haven't started, right? Yeah. Okay. So how I want to explain like how dual degree sort of goes is I wouldn't say I personally feel like I have no time to do anything, but I would say if you compare yourself to like for me specifically, I have roommates that are pure business, and just for reference, I'm taking double their course amount because I just have more science courses, and the nature of a dual degree or combined degree in my case makes it so that there is a lot of courses in a very short amount of time. So for example, in these programs, you might tend to see less elective space, and that can sometimes mean that you feel more pressured with your classes. In terms of a class-to-class comparison, I'd say that a computer science course is actually probably the same workload as maybe 2 business courses put together. And the simple reason behind that is because computer science requires a lot more of a deep level of understanding. I hate to say it this way, but sometimes with business courses, you can just sort of write things, and as long as they make sense, your teacher will be fine with it. But with computer science courses, you genuinely need to truly understand the content in order to score well on an exam setting and something like that. And especially for UBC, I actually had flipped classrooms, which means that we do most of the school content prior to the class and then go into the class and just sort of do more discussion or review for actually both some computer science and business courses. But because of the computer science courses requiring a lot more depth of knowledge, I'd say, and less of a subjective thing, it tends to take me a lot more time. And also, I tend to be weaker in math subjects. So in my first year, I took a discrete math class for computer science, which involves a lot of discrete math. I did circuitry. It's just sort of everywhere. It's a UBC thing. But classes like that tend to take a lot more of your practice on practice problems and things like that, which are also a huge part of your workload. So on a day-to-day average, I don't think I'm studying that much, maybe 3 to 4 hours a day. And then I usually tend to reserve like every Sunday, I just crunch through all of my work. But yeah, I'd say you can definitely still find time to do a lot of other things in it, but definitely prepare to be more overwhelmed than people that are just doing business, for example, or even sometimes more overwhelmed than people just doing CS.
Cool. Actually, I'm interested in your program that you're doing, Lux. So your program is more of a combined degree as opposed to a dual degree. Could you differentiate between the two?
Yeah, so this is actually probably one of the most confusing parts about my degree. I had to explain it to people at work. It's a mess. But essentially what my degree is a dual degree, except we can take slightly less computer science courses, mainly math modules. We actually don't take second year math, which is really helpful because I don't like math. But we essentially do about a bit more. So in between the credit number between a major and a minor status. And so it's done in order to integrate. And on the business side, our degree focuses on our business technology management specialization. So technically I'm doing BTM and CS more like a minor way. But the best way to, I guess, think about it or rationalize it is it's essentially a dual degree that doesn't give you the BCS. And so that means I graduate with specifically a BCom, but because my program is super small and the specialization is very well known, especially on companies nearby. So for example, Microsoft hires a lot out of my program because they know what the program is. But yeah, it's definitely not as traditional or easy to explain as just a BBA BCS because you get both degrees on that. But on mine, the major difference is I only graduate with a BCom.
Cool. Okay, Sarah, let's just take turns and ask questions.
What is it? Oh, in high school, how did you structure your classes and extracurriculars to gain both business and computer science expertise? This can be for both Christian and Michelle.
Okay, sure. I guess I can start with this one. I feel like for me, it kind of came a bit like naturally. It was never like, okay, I want to get into this program, so let me like think about what kinds of ECs I want to take in both. It was more so it's kind of happened in terms of like I just found that my interest kind of naturally like lied in both. I think for me, like throughout high school, I was always like a DECA kid. So like DECA, for those of you who don't know, is like this like business oriented like club that has like regional, provincial, like and like international level competitions. So I was like always competing in that. And then I also like took on a role like on the provincial council, like helping like to train the competitors across the province. So yeah, that was like my business related experience. I also competed in like FBLA and like other kinds of like pitch competitions. I was also like president of my school's entrepreneurship club. So like those were like my kind of business and like experiences. I also like had my own like private tutoring business where I would like tutor kids in like STEM. And then for the CS stuff, for me, it was kind of like CS and business went together because of my like love for like startups and entrepreneurship. And it's like at the core, it's like I was always about tinkering and creating. So it was like CS is the means to create things and then business is the means to launch it, that kind of thing. So that is how it kind of like structured for me because it was never like completely discrete things. It kind of like melded together a bit for me in terms of like the intersection between tech and entrepreneurship and business. And yeah, in terms of my CS experience, I worked like internships at RBC last summer and this summer as a like software developer. And like I had like went to a lot of hackathons, stuff like that. And then I found out, okay, like creating things with software is pretty cool too. So then like, on the business side of things, like, creating like pitches for them and like stuff like that also interested me. So like that is kind of how it came together. That was a bit of a ramble, I know, but yeah.
And for myself, I'd say I took a more experimental path because I was also super big in like DECA FBLA type of stuff. I also did debate for a while. So I did competitive debate and speech for a period of time during high school. But I really didn't think about integrating this computer science aspect into my degree. In fact, I straight up thought I was just going to go to Western Ivy and just chill out for so long. But during COVID, obviously with the change into technology, I built my own PC for the first time and I started finding that I actually do really like technology. I would say that currently where I stand, I don't think I want to go into like a software path, but I do really love the fact that technology is so important to our lives right now. And it's something that I think that having technical knowledge in is super helpful to any business role, because it's impossible to talk about business without talking about anything digital. Digital transformation is the biggest trend right now in businesses in general. And it's just, I think that combining those two knowledge domains gives you a lot more opening and a lot more potential to access a lot of roles and positions that are emerging or coincide with emerging technology. But in terms of extracurriculars during high school, after discovering like I sort of wanted to do it, I mainly just, took CS in class, felt like I actually do like sort of the peace and quiet of coding when I can do it without any bugs. When there is bugs, it's a little bit worse, but if there's no bugs, I enjoy it a lot. And then also I joined robotics club for my school as well, and was able to get a lot of experience in that. So yeah.
Great, thanks for sharing. Okay, so we have some questions in the chat. We'll start with the first one. How early should I start preparing for my AIF if I want to get into CSBVA? So Krish, that's you.
Honestly, I feel like there's no like timeline of like how early you should start like preparing for the AIF. I feel like honestly, just as long as it takes you, and obviously the earlier the better, because that will just give you more time to start like thinking of ideas. And I think the one thing for like Waterloo's AIF is that it is not necessarily that you have to struggle to like write things. It's actually the opposite, because it's the character counts are actually pretty constraining. They don't actually have word counts on their like supplementary form. It's a character count, so it's like you have to like think about every single character that you're putting in and if it's actually like contributing to your application. So it does definitely take time, more than you'd think, to like try to distill down your application. Like I remember when I went my first draft, I had to like cut it like almost in half, and that like took a lot of time of thinking like, okay, what is actually relevant and what's not. So yeah, like I wouldn't even necessarily say like there's some like how early should you start preparing. As early as possible. For me myself, it only really took me around like a week or a few days to get like a draft done. But then from there, just like the refining process is what takes time. So give yourself some time for that. Don't stress yourself out. Get it edited by your friends and family, and then let's go from there.
We have one other question in the chat. It's about how to find internships in high school.
Oh yeah. Okay, I can take this one too. So I think for internships, it really does depend. Some you can find like rarely like through like job postings and positions. Like there are some programs that you will find. Like for example, the RBC internship that I did last summer and I'm working currently this summer. It was through a job posting on LinkedIn for like their software like innovation developer role. And I applied, ended up getting it. But the summer before that, like summer going into grade 11, I worked an internship at this startup in Toronto called Hatch Coding. And for that one, it was honestly just a bunch of cold outreach. Like I was sending out a lot of emails to like recruiters at a bunch of different companies and just basically just asking if they would be willing to hire like a high school student. And I feel like in high school, it's pretty hard to kind of like get your foot in the door. But it really is just about the numbers. Just keep reaching out to companies that you find who are interesting and cool. And then, if you attach your resume, if they find you to be kind of interesting, they'll reply back. If they can't hire you, they'll let you know, or they'll just ghost you. But yeah, so like it's a combination of like job postings, which are rare. So I'd say more so like a lot of cold outreach if you want to find those internships at like smaller startups that won't even necessarily be like actual job postings and positions. It's more so like you're kind of creating your own internship, so to speak. Like that's kind of like that was kind of my route that I did like going into grade 11. So yeah, like be open to all kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, just to add on to that question, do you have any like research projects or like co-op experiences that like you've been in or like been a part of in business and or computer science?
Is this directed to me again?
Well, it can be both you and Michelle.
Oh, okay. Michelle, why don't you start?
Sure. So for this question, I actually did not really do any job experience during high school. In fact, I kept telling myself I was going to take like CS50 before I started school last year, and I still didn't do it. So well, I just want to like quell if you guys are super getting worried about internships in high school stuff. It's not necessary. You don't 100% need to do it. Obviously, it's helpful. It's very, very helpful actually, but it's not something that you feel like if you don't do it, then you can't get into a pathway like this. So for me, as I mentioned, this summer I'm working at Huawei, and I'm very thankful to be in an interdisciplinary team and an interdisciplinary role by myself. I as well have done multiple hackathons and am currently a part of our tri-mentorship program as a part of my school CS faculty as well. And as I just like think is the big emphasis is that, especially with a degree like CS and business, it's really hard to know exactly what you want to go into. You know, you could do technical product management, you could do software engineering, you could do all of these different types of things. And so the best way to find out what you want to do is either to do projects, for example, write a bunch of code, see if you like the back end work, see if you like doing that type of thing, or better off working in those roles. So I'd say that in like a dual degree, it's really important to be open-minded. Like next year, I want to do either dev or consulting, just because if I don't try it out, I'm not going to know whether or not that suits my skill sets or not. And so I think that that's something I specifically want to emphasize for people considering like an interdisciplinary degree.
Okay, I mean, I can add on to this as well. So like, just to kind of clarify, the question was like regarding like research projects, or like what exactly was the question again?
Like research projects, internships, or like co-op experiences.
Like about the experience itself, or like how to land it, or like what aspect of it?
Or like what like research projects, internships, or co-op experiences have you been a part of, like so far?
Oh, okay. I think I've basically already mentioned this. So yeah, like I had like 3 internships throughout high school. One was at like a startup in Toronto, and then the other 2 were at RBC. And then in terms of like research projects, I think that was like I never really did any like research in high school. But I did do like a lot of personal projects that I would create. Again, this is like very software focused, and I think that's like where my software side really kicked in, because all my projects were like software related. So like it would be like whether it be like at hackathons, like creating like all kinds of like different things, like whether it be like creating like different web apps, like some combination of machine learning, things like that. But then on top of that, there were some like personal projects that I built like outside of hackathons, like for instance, like working with machine learning models to help kind of like with image classification and things like that. But yeah, that's that's pretty much it.
Cool. Okay, thanks for sharing. Another question that we missed in the chat was, does having a BCom degree versus a dual degree make a difference in finding jobs?
So I think I'll take this. I would say yes, but also no. It depends a lot on which program you're in, whether that program itself has reputation. Because, for example, as I mentioned, people know Bucks as a program. And so it's a lot easier for me to position myself to recruiters. And also, a lot of people are very interested in what this program means. It's not very common where you find a program as a BCom, but the specialization is computer science. It's something that's quite unique. But I would say it really depends on what you want to do. For example, if you want to be, and you already know you want to be a software engineer, you're not considering any of these other pathways, then it might be better for you to go the traditional BCS route. But that doesn't mean you can't be a software engineer out of Bucks. For example, the very first event for Bucks we had, so many people upper years were saying like, I'm in software and I'm Bucks, and I stand out actually because I will always be the best person they interview because I have those business skills behind me. And oftentimes, depending on the specific role and team they're looking on, they might actually want someone who has that business knowledge, can sort of do product engineering and not just software. So obviously it can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing. It just really depends on what you're looking for and what you make the most out of your experience. But I think that's something that I will definitely emphasize, is that it's very helpful for interdisciplinary roles, specifically for product management. It's really helpful to have like the primary business background, but also really be able to show like, hey, I still am technical and I know my technical aspects. And so, yeah, I hope that sort of helps a little bit. It's sort of a wishy-washy answer, but that's the nature of, you know, how much your degree actually holds. Yeah.
Okay, we have one other question in the chat. What advice do you have for gaining letters of recommendation from teachers?
I can start with this one. I think that it honestly all starts with just like building like a solid like foundation and like a good relationship with your teacher early on. because I think those like little things do add up. So like, of course, like being courteous, like being kind, and then also like going out of your way to kind of stay behind to ask like more questions and stuff like that. And like really just show your interest. Like if there's a subject or something that you're interested in, show that you're interested. Like don't just like be hiding that interest away to yourself. Like show, like genuinely like be curious in class, ask questions. And like if there's some other stuff that you're curious about, like or extending your learning outside of just the classroom, bring that up too. So like for example, like with my economics teacher, I think I had like a great relationship in terms of like I was always really interested in like econ, and that's part of what actually led me to like choose the business degree. But whenever I would be in the course, I would be really attentive, and then after class, I would be kind of like asking about if there's any like other opportunities that I can partake in. So then he ended up being the advisor for this investment competition that we took part in at our school, as well as for some other clubs. So then we also had that to go off of, and then just like when asking, I think in person is usually always better to kind of introduce the idea, because they're more likely to respond as opposed to just like if the email comes out of nowhere. So like I would say introduce the idea in person, like that you're what you're looking for. Usually it would be helpful to kind of also send them a bit about yourself, because not too many teachers know a lot about what you're doing behind the scenes. But yeah, just like start to TLDR, to sum up, just have that strong background and foundation, show your interest in the subject, let them know a bit about what you're doing outside of school, and bring up the idea in person, like after class or something like that, and then yeah, just go from there.
Michelle, do you have an answer to the recommendation thing?
I do not really. I very much agree with Krish on this, and I have yet to need a letter of recommendation at the university level, so no comment on that.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next question. Why did you choose your specific CS and business program over others? So for example, IB and CS.
So I'll start for this, I guess. I actually was really considering IB and CS up until I was considering transferring back. I was considering changing my decision during the summer because of homesickness and stuff that, personal reasons. But I'd say one of the reasons is like looking into what you want out of the program. For example, for me, like having only needing first year math was something that was really important to me because I do struggle a lot more math. And also with IB, you do have the pressure of needing an 80%. That wasn't something that I was willing to bank on. So I felt a lot more safer going to a program where once I'm in, my grades don't really matter that much. And the other big aspect for me is length of program. So for example, IB CS dual degree is 5 years total. My degree is actually 4 years for completion, but I will probably take it in 5 years because I want to do like an 8-month co-op somewhere in between, have that flexibility to integrate a longer length co-op into my program. And as well, for me, the big thing, I know Krish mentioned earlier with the Waterloo choice is like being able to go to American companies. That's equally something that I considered a lot for UBC. That's not to say that I know right now a lot of incredible Ivy people are going into cool fields and technology, but UBC, because of the proximity to California, Seattle, I mentioned Microsoft specifically, that was something that was a huge drawing point. I want to be in West Coast tech, so I thought that going to the West Coast would be a great way to get involved in that.
Yeah, no, that all sounds good. I think for me, why I took my specific CS program over others, I think like the CS part was important to me. For me, I think it was more important, like the CS degree was like the main thing for me, and is like any additional business that came along with it was great. So for me, I wanted to choose like first off just like the best like CS program that I saw in my eyes, and I think that was always like at Waterloo. In terms of just like all of the factors that like I was considering in terms of like Michelle mentioned, the link to California, American employers, job opportunities, and then also just like the student culture in terms of like just all like being really driven, and just being pretty academically rigorous. And then like in terms of the business, then I was always kind of inclined towards that too. So then I kind of thought like, why not? So that was never like the business program was never the first priority for me. I'll put it that way. And actually it was really interesting because I was never like, that was never my top choice. This program was never my top choice until like later on, when I started thinking about it a little more, I was, actually more inclined towards like software engineering at Waterloo or like CS. But then when I got it, I was like, like maybe I do want to pursue my interest in business as well. And then I also got the National Math Scholarship, which was like $25,000. And that kind of helped like sweeten the deal a little bit more. So I was like, okay, like I'll think about it, and then like I ended up choosing it. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think this is our last question for the day. Any tips for getting high 90s for competitive programs?
I'll just start. I would say, like, I guess I obviously just pertaining for high school, just stay on top of your work. Don't slack off. If you have things that need to be done on a day-to-day basis, don't like not do it, you know? Like make sure you're on top of your work. If you do ever need help or you feel like you're not understanding something, your teachers and your peers are really truly your best resource. And especially in grade 12, I think a lot of importance is talking to your teacher and making sure you're understanding. Like if you got bad feedback on an English essay, go to them immediately and be like, hey, I really want to improve. What things can I do to help this process? And ask, for example, for English, ask for feedback intermittently on an assignment. Potentially showing an initiative that you want to do better is the best way to sort of help make your grades as good if you are previously struggling. If you're doing like quite well already, I'd say just don't slack off. I know a lot of people start slacking off as soon as offers start pouring in, which is definitely valid, and you can definitely do that, but don't start doing that until you're really 100% sure you have the offer you want. And so I'd say staying on top of things, being diligent, and taking initiative to talk to your professors when things don't go your ideal way is definitely one of the best ways.
Yeah, no, definitely echo like Michelle's sentiments. Yeah, I think just like staying focused and driven, and then like taking the initiative to kind of go out of your way to like seek help if you need it for sure. And then just like I think also like working smart, like try to find like what kind of schedule works best for you. Like if you really are not a morning person, don't try to force yourself to be a morning person. Like if you do just truly work best in the night like I do, then just like take advantage of those like night hours when like it's all peace and quiet, and get your studying in then. Like at the end of the day, just like work with yourself and kind of see what works best for you, because at the end of the day, like anything is possible. Like just shoot for the stars. So like yeah, in terms of like getting those high 90s to competitive programs, like figure out also like I would say like what courses you need to put more work into, and like focus on those, whereas the other ones where you feel like you can do decently well without putting as much studying, I think that's important to consider, because it's like at the end of the day, time is always a trade-off. So it's like the opportunity cost of like spending more time towards studying for one thing over the other. Like you want to make sure that you're maximizing the output you get out of it. So like again, put your effort into somewhere where it will pay off, is what I'm trying to say, and where you'll actually receive the greatest benefit. Yeah, and
Yeah,
as well.
just to tag on to that, since I just put in the chat, but like for example, I mentioned for me personally, business courses take maybe half the time as a CS course. And so the effort to result ratio is something I really put emphasis on, because business courses are so subjective, you're really only getting graded in a specific range. At my school, it's actually a capped range. So all the classes attempt to have an average at an 82 flat, which means if it's a subjective course, your grades are likely not going to be above 90, and your grades are not going to be below 60 either. And so if I put an extra 5 hours into doing a business assignment, and just to get an extra 2 or 3%, that's not as worth the time for me to put extra 5 hours in my computer science content, and just all of a sudden, I'm able to do a lot better on that exam. So that's always work smarter.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you so much for all of your responses. I think it's time to go back to the main room now. It is 4:56, so I think if everybody could head back right now, that would be very much appreciated.
Hi, I'm Rita. So I'm in the life sciences. I haven't taken any health science classes in my degree, but I did when I was applying, I was very involved with all my friends who were applying for university. I graduated during COVID. So I can answer based on primarily Ontario schools, I suppose. Health sciences and Ontario programs tend to be one, a little bit more flexible in terms of the amount of science credits you have to do, and two, can tend to be have some more space in terms of social science understandings and understanding more public health and work like that, whereas life sciences can be much more pure science heavy. So it might be more suited towards somebody who is more interested in pursuing research, or if you're looking to write the MCAT, sometimes taking a life science focus can make a little bit of sense, but also health sciences also works in that sense because of the fact that most health sciences majors still have to take the general first and second year science classes. But that was, I would say, are the big differences. Life sciences tends to be a little bit more rigid in that sense, like what I was saying, whereas health sciences can be a little bit more open. This will be definitely depend program to program. So I would recommend in that case, if you're looking between the two in terms of what the experience taking either of those programs would be at each school, to look at the individual classes. I think that would be a really smart way to look at it, is what I recommend to most people in terms of deciding between programs. But if there's anything more specific you want me to elaborate on, feel free to drop another question in the chat. How many safety schools did I apply to? I would say for my degree, to be completely honest, applying into more of a general life sciences program, most of them aren't that competitive, especially in Ontario. I find the schools are not that competitive for those programs. So if your average is in the high 80s to even low 90s, you're pretty much safe for most schools. To elaborate on that though, of the Canadian schools I applied to, I would say UBC was the only one I was possibly concerned I wouldn't have gotten into. So I applied to 6 schools, 4 in Ontario, 2 in BC, and then a handful in the US. So I would say I technically applied to 5 safety schools, but genuine, in not specific to my experience, I would say you should definitely apply to at least a couple of them. And I would apply to kind of a range of safety schools, especially if you're applying to programs that are very competitive as your goal programs, for example, McMaster Life Science, or sorry, McMaster Health Science, or something like a Waterloo Engineering program. In that case, I would definitely say to have some mid-tier options and then some very much so safe schools, just in case something happens. Admissions processes change year to year. So it's something really mindful to be of. In the US, a lot of people talk about target, reach, and safety schools. So that's another way to look at it. Target schools are kind of where you would want to go, where you think you could get into, where you would be happy to get into. Reach schools would be schools that might be a little bit beyond where you think you may get into, or maybe you may think you have a more of a slim chance. And then safety schools are exactly what you would expect. So applying to those 3 kinds of levels is a good idea. And especially because in Ontario, you have to apply to at least 3. You could split it up that way, but I would also apply to more than 3 schools if it's financially feasible for you.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. So for a short introduction, my name is Angelina, and I'm one of the ignite.fair Science Breakout MCs. And Allison?
And I'm the other MC, and just starting off with the first scripted question that we have is, how challenging is coursework and exams, and what strategies do you use to help study?
I would say coursework tends to not be that difficult. Like, it tends to be more about making sure that you are doing your readings, are showing up at lectures. The grades you're getting within the coursework, typically, especially within first and second year sciences, tends to be more of kind of the free marks. It might only add up to about 20% of your marks, whereas the rest of your marks will come from midterms and exams, especially in first year. So I would say the midterms and the exams are much more important in the long run in terms of maximizing your grade, trying to do as well as you can on those, but also doing very well in the coursework can be really beneficial as well. Because if you get like, if your goal average is say an 80 and you're getting 70s on the midterms, but you're acing all of the really easy things, you still will pull into an 80, which I think is something that people tend to forget about. Especially I've noticed at UBC, a lot of things tend to overlap and people get overwhelmed and they stop doing their 2% projects, their 1% quizzes that are, basically multiple choice. And a lot of the time have multiple attempts at getting, so you could be theoretically getting 100 or close to 100 in those courses or in that part of your course. So I think that's really important, of trying to get as many marks as possible in the easy ways. That way you take off a little bit of pressure when something does come around that is very stressful. In terms of balancing stress with that, I think everybody does it differently. I like to have a calendar with time blocks in it. So I would say like, oh, I need 3 hours to study for math this day, and then I need 2 hours to study for math that day, whatever. Breaking it up and be able to move things around in case something goes wrong, in case, I miss my bus or I wake up late and then, or I don't feel productive in the morning. I say, okay, well, I'm gonna take the morning off because I technically had the afternoon off. So I'm just gonna shift my day. That's worked really well for me, but everybody handles it a little bit differently.
Thank you for that. And what inspired you to pursue your major in your specific field? And what is your least and favorite part about it?
What inspired me was, I guess, growing up, I was very lucky to travel, and I got to see the ocean in the Caribbean a lot, and I really fell in love with it. And I was a big nerd about it when I was really little. My parents were really strict about screen time. I wasn't really allowed to have internet access until I was probably 9 or 10. So I was reading a lot of books, watching a lot of documentaries with my parents, and I really fell in love with the ocean and biology. I wasn't surrounded by a lot of people in science. My entire family is essentially in the business world. So to me, I started to pursue health science because it seemed like the only science career that I was ever exposed to, especially because I played sports, got hurt, stereotypical story of an athlete getting hurt and going into kinesiology. But I realized very quickly once I was in that field that it wasn't something that I enjoyed. So I did some reflecting over COVID, decided that I really wanted to work in conservation work. I really wanted to protect the natural environment. So that's what I do now. I do it in a couple of different ways, and I'm not really sure how I'll do it long term, but trying to figure that out for myself as well. My favorite parts of my degree are I've picked a school that is well situated for my degree. So many people are involved in marine research here. So I think that's really important of knowing the community that you're going into. Not specific to my field. This is so valid to every field. So if you're really into health sciences, a school like McMaster might be a really good choice because there's a med school there. Things like that of knowing the community you're going into is going to be relatable to what you want to study, and you're going to have people around you in that sense. My least favorite part of my program, I guess, could be there's a lot of, this is common in all science programs, there's a lot of required courses I have to take that are not necessarily relevant to the career that I want to do. And that'll be to varying degrees at different schools. So it's really up to you to balance that idea of, am I willing to take, 3 to 4 physics classes in order to go to a school that has XYZ pro? Is it going to balance these things out? So I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Oh yeah, learning those pros and cons are definitely helpful, necessary. So next question is, how important are extracurricular activities and community service in the admissions decision?
In general, I would say for most Ontario life science programs, which I assume most of the attendees are probably from Ontario, they're not super important because a lot of them are very just grades based. In terms of UBC, it is really important because we have what's called a personal profile, which is kind of similar to what the AAF would be for Waterloo. So at UBC, actually, according to guidance counselors at UBC, the personal profile is actually 40% of your application decision. So it's almost as important as your grades. So there are a lot of students who you'll meet at UBC Science who got in with a low 80 average, and then you'll meet people who didn't get in with a 90 average, because it's almost, because the fact that that means so much, it means a lot here. So it's very specific to the school you're applying to. And I think it's mindful to probably ask students who are in the program that you want to get into for more specific details, because sometimes when you go to big events or university events, they don't get into the nitty gritty of things. So looking to more specific people is sometimes a good idea.
Definitely. And how is the workload? And on average, how many hours a day are you dedicated to study?
The workload is rough. It can definitely be a big transition in first year. It was for me, especially in my opinion, because I had, kind of the classic science student story of I found high school fairly easy. It wasn't too much of an issue for me in terms of managing my time. I also graduated during COVID, so my grade in 11, 12 years were basically online. So I was definitely slacking off in that sense, especially more so than before I was during COVID. So the transition was even harder. But I would say learning to manage your time is really important, and also learning that there is a limit to how much time you can spend studying, to the point that it becomes detrimental. It's kind of a bell curve. Your productivity, you might be good working 6 hours a day, but you hit 8 and it's just you're actually being less productive than doing 6. And I think, like I was saying in the main breakout room or the main panel room, that's why a lot of students at UBC choose to drop down to 4 courses or to 3 courses for their year, because they start to realize that they're actually hurting their academic performance by doing so much. And to address the second part of the question, I personally, during the school year, it really fluxes how many hours I'm spending on school. So in my first and second year, I took full course loads. I took 5 to 6 courses a year, 5 to 6 courses a semester, sorry. In terms of hours of class, I probably spent 3 to 4 hours a day in class. And then I would probably spend an equal amount roughly outside of class. And that I think is pretty typical. And then some students will spend some time on weekends. And I think that's really another balance of, are you willing to work 7 days a week and work less per day? Or do you want to take weekends off? Which a lot of older students will start to structure their weeks like that, to almost work school like a 9 to 5, which can be a really good way to adjust to work-life balance.
Oh yeah, balancing life is definitely difficult, especially then. So the next question is, what are some common misconceptions or myths about your program that you've encountered?
I think a common misconception you get with biology programs is that there are no job prospects when you graduate. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that the job prospects are as good as CS. That's never going to be the exact one-to-one. But I often say when I do events like this, and I do a lot of this in my conservation work, meeting with students who want to go into conservation work, is that when people talk about the kinds of jobs that people in finance may get that are really high paying out of the gate, I think it's really important to sit back and also think about the fact that those students spend so much time networking, so much time reaching out, so much time building extracurricular portfolios that are catered towards getting a job and not catered towards getting into medical school, getting into research programs, postgrad. So if your goal is to graduate with an undergrad in science and then go straight into the workforce or have that be an option, you also have to think in that mindset of, how do I build my personal resume, my personal profile to get a job and not only to get into medical or doctors or dentistry school or whatever it may be in terms of professional programs. I jokingly say network like you want to be an investment banker, no matter what field you're in. And I think that is really important and something that I've noticed within a lot of my friends who are in conservation work, which is notoriously a low paying field, who do actually make at least a livable wage, if not a comfortable wage. Most of them had that mindset of, I'm going to network my ass off and I'm going to go and find these people who are in those jobs that I really, really, really want and find out how they got there, because you're going to find the people who worked a similar path as you. Some of them might have a master's degree, and that might mean that, you know, it would be an easier path to get a master's degree. But there's also pathways beyond that. And I often talk about that in the sense of, you know, a master's degree is abysmal pay already. So you're going to spend two to 3 years in a master's program making kind of not so great pay, where you could also be spending those 2 to 3 years working a job that is adjacent related, making probably similar, if not a little bit better pay, and then going into that job with more work experience application. So I think that's something you have to balance, of understanding that grad school and professional programs post undergrad can sometimes equate in certain ways to work experience. So deciding which pathway works best for you is really important.
And what kind of research opportunities are available for students interested in your major?
Yeah, so UBC specifically is a huge research hub, similar to the way U of T is or McGill is. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities here. So UBC has a couple of different entryways into explicit entryways into research. We have an undergraduate research opportunities program, which is acronym TRO. We have REX, which is very similar, REX. And they talk about these a lot in the first year classes. My department recently started what we call BUDR, which is the Biology Undergraduate Diversity and Research Program. So in that program, they mentor students who are underrepresented in the research fields, and they pair them up with mentors, and then a certain amount of students who excel in that mentorship program actually get placed into volunteer positions in labs, and some positions which are paid, and that's a really great way to get your foot in the door. But that's also not the only way you can do it. I personally didn't go that route. I actually went to one of my first year professors who I really enjoyed taking her class, but she actually wasn't in research. And I just went to her and I said, hey, you know, I really want to do this in ecology. I really want to explore marine science, but I have never had any experience. I'm really just looking to get my foot in the door. And I asked her for a recommendation of how do I do so? How do I get my name out there? Or how do I get just an experience? And she recommended to me to apply to the lab that I now work in. I actually get paid to work in. I did volunteer for a year underneath a master's student. And then I ended up getting my own research project funded that my PI endorsed. And now I am working on my own personal research. So I think it's, I would recommend going and being honest to people that you're looking for advice about how to get into things and seeing what it is recommended at your school. At UBC, it is really common for people to volunteer for a year, even if that means just washing glassware for a couple hours a week, which we see a lot in the microbiome and pharmacology labs. But getting your name into a lab in that way can be much more likely for you to get that paid position once they have funding to pay for an undergraduate, because they tend to want to give back to people who have also worked with them.
Okay, so for the next question is, how do students typically find clinical placements, and when should someone start looking for those opportunities if they want to do that in university?
So I think I missed the middle of your questions. Did you say find internships and clinical placements? I'm just looking at the top.
When should the students start looking for these opportunities?
I would say in my program at UBC, we have what's called the Work Learn program, which is a really great program that our school offers. So it's jobs that are partially funded by the university that typically take place within the university or within university partnerships. These jobs can be a little bit competitive to get, but it's also really important to, like I said, network or apply to jobs like an investment banking student. I send applications and I immediately send a follow-up email. I send emails asking for updates on timelines, making sure my name is at the top of their minds all the time. And like I said, it'll differ between schools depending on what you have. At UBC, a lot of the jobs tend to be in most fields word of the mouth. A lot of the really good jobs that actually pay a decent amount tend to be word of mouth outside of the work learn program. The work learn program is really good at UBC because of the fact that it's subsidized by the school. It tends to pay much higher than minimum wage, which is pretty rare to find jobs that are within the life sciences at an undergraduate level, at an entry level that pay decently well. For pay transparency, a lot of in BC, the minimum wage is $16. The lowest I've ever seen a work learn job get paid that posted at is just under 18, and the highest I've ever seen is 26. So these jobs are pretty heavily funded, and if you can get your foot in the door, a lot of them will allow you to renew your contracts. So I had one job over this summer. I'm renewing into winter, and I will probably renew this job until I graduate. So that's something to keep in mind. And I would say looking and being mindful of the opportunities as soon as possible is really good. So even in your first year, being mindful of where do people look for job postings? How did these people in their fourth or third years who are doing things that I might be interested in doing find their jobs? Asking them that type of stuff is really important, just to be mindful of where things are going. And then I would say, in my personal opinion, it's important to get into those experiences at least in your second year, because as I shared earlier, I had originally wanted to do health sciences and I decided that it really was not for me once I worked in it. So I think it's important to try to get your foot in the door and experience a career before you full force graduate with a degree in it, perhaps. So you, one, save yourself some financial hardship of having to possibly do another degree and do a career switch, but two, also just not getting yourself lost in a career and feeling stuck at it too when you feel like you're too late in a decision to make a change.
That was really insightful, thank you. And for the last question, what hands-on learning experiences can I expect as a student in your major?
So in my major, what's really been, I really enjoyed, I've had a couple of labs in my second year that were dissection based. So for my major, you have to pick a certain amount of a kind of ecology, zoology classes. And so I took one on invertebrates. So I got to dissect a squid, I dissected urchins, I dissected snails, different types of things like that. I had friends who took the vertebrate program who got to dissect sharks, they dissected pigs, things like that, which is really hands-on. Because UBC is a much larger school, a lot of the hands-on work becomes very intense in third and fourth year. So that's something I haven't had direct experience with yet. At other schools, you may get more hands-on experience in your first and second year. So UBC kind of has this really heavy lecture-based, theory-based first and second year, especially first year. And then third and fourth year, they do a kind of full flip where you'll be taking full lab classes. So for example, this year, I'm taking a microbiology lab and a cell biology lab they don't even have a lecture component going with them. So it's all just lab-based learning research techniques, learning how to do research yourself. And both of them are culminating in a final research project that you do either in teams or individually, where you're doing basically honors level research in your third year classes. So that's a really different model that a lot of other smaller schools that you might see like Guelph or like TMU, that's my program and my experience is probably more akin to something like U of T or McGill. In terms of other hands-on experiences, for my degree, I had to do a field research program in my fourth year. So I have to go to Vancouver Island, which is an hour and a half ferry ride away, to the Banfield Marine Station, which is a 3-hour drive from the ferry station on the island. I spend a week there during my reading break, producing my own personal research in the field. So that's something that I'm really excited for to do. And yeah, that's a really great thing to do. We have directed studies and honors as well, or if you want to do more hands-on stuff. So those different things that you could add on to your degree is really important to be mindful of, depending on what experiences you want to have.
Thank you. And someone asked in the chat, when you're applying for a life or health sci program, would you use your top 6 courses in grade 11 or in grade 12?
Yeah, so in general in Ontario, you'll get the top 6 grade 12. In terms of when you get in, that can change. So if things haven't changed since when I applied a couple of years ago, if you're getting really early admission, they'll probably be looking at some of your grade 11 grades because they per se don't have your calculus grade. And if it's too early to have midterm grades for advanced functions, they might have to look at your grade 11 functions grade, things like that. It'll be the same for chemistry, bio, math. I've had friends who have strategically done the flip of like, I did not do well in grade 11 biology. I want to get in really early to this university, and specifically ask their guidance counselor to have grade 12 biology be in their first term, because they don't want to wait for that kind of last round of admissions in April, May, I believe is typically when it is in Ontario. In terms of UBC, they look at all of your grades for grade 11 and 12. So it's a little bit different here. It's a little bit more holistic. There is emphasis placed on your core grades related to your program. So for science, it would be your sciences and English. And UBC also tends to drop your lowest 1 or 2 grades from that grade 11 or 12 year. So if you had like a really bad grade 11 English or something like that, it wouldn't mean you cannot absolutely get into the school. And UBC also does different weightings for different kinds of courses. So for IB classes get a 4% boost. AP classes get a 2% boost. If you're applying from the US, honors classes get a 2% boost. Things like that. Albertan students get a 4% boost, which is the same of what they get at Waterloo because they have the diploma mandatory exams in grade 12. So it's a little bit different depending where you're applying, but in general, if you're applying in Ontario, it's top 6 grade 12.
And then any more questions that attendees have, then just put them in the chat now because we will be going back to the main room shortly.
Backup plans for post-secondary, I'm assuming you mean in terms of like if I didn't go to post-secondary at all. So like if I had kind of finished my education after high school. Yeah, no, maybe. Yeah, or even besides, okay. If I didn't go to university, I honestly probably would have spent at least a year or two working. It was also COVID. I honestly did not really have any other backup plans if I didn't go to post-secondary, considering the fact, like what I said earlier, the majority of the programs that I applied to, I wasn't really concerned about whether or not I would get in. I was also really lucky to receive a couple of very early admissions. I think my first admission was November or December. So I kind of knew pretty early on that I was going to go to university, even if I didn't get into my most preferred programs. In terms of besides this course, there's very few things that I probably would have been interested in other than generally in the life sciences and ecology. So I probably would have stayed within that. Had I not gone into university, looking back on it now, I probably would have considered like vet tech school, which is usually a college degree. So I would still be able to work with animals, but not have to go through a full university program. Also, there's a lot of work in ecotourism, which a lot of people in my degree do over summers to make some money and also to see some really beautiful parts of the world. One of my very close friends is a whale watching guide here in Vancouver, BC, and he makes one, pretty good money, and two, gets to spend all day on the water looking at whales and seals and dolphins, which is honestly such a beautiful career that I'm so jealous of a lot of the time. I do field research myself, but my field research is very different. I have seen whales in my research, but not in the same way that he gets to. So I think it's really interesting to get to see people who do different careers and also be mindful that I think I personally grew up in a bubble of all these high-powered careers being pushed on me really hard and thinking like, oh, well, if I'm going to do ecology, I might as well go do a master's and a PhD was like really what I was told was my only possibility, my only option. But really those jobs, they will pay slightly more than if you only have your bachelor's or you don't have your bachelor's at all in my field, but they're still not going to be $250,000 salary jobs. So I think sometimes balancing that idea of what's going to make you happy in terms of education experience and life experience is really important when it comes to also the money. Besides this course, I probably looking back on it, if I was not going to do science, I probably would have done other things that I was really interested in. I really enjoyed technological design classes that I took in high school. So I really enjoyed architecture courses, courses where I was working on CAD, working on 3D modeling, which is very different from what I do now. But it was some of my favorite things. So things that make you happy, I think can be really important is what is really important to me. I want to enjoy my work. There's also the flip mindset of working a job that pays the bills. You can spend your free accessible income doing things that are really happy and enjoyable to you. So I think they're both very valid options to look at in terms of how you choose what career path you're doing. It's just really what works for you.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. And thank you for being the only panelist in this room. We were supposed to have more. But
No
now
worries.
we're gonna head back to the main room now, just for some closing remarks before we end the panel.
Thank you for coming.
So welcome back, everyone. We hope you got all of your questions answered in the breakout rooms and got to learn a lot from our panelists.
And that brings us to the end of our 2023 Canadian University panel. We'd like to thank you all for attending and say a very, very special thank you to all of our terrific panelists for taking this time to share your experiences and advice. On behalf of all high school students who are beginning this process, I can definitely say that this means a lot to all of us. So thank you so much, and we wish you the best in all of your future endeavors. If you still have any questions for our panelists, there will be a follow-up email sent after this panel, which will contain their contact information as they consented to sharing, so you will be able to get in touch.
So before you go, I'd like to remind you that our next event is our Ignite Fair on November 25th from 1 to 3 p.m. powered by Volunteer Toronto. It will take place in North York. So to learn more about this event and our organization, you can visit our Instagram, Facebook, or website.
So that just about wraps up our event. Thank you once again to everyone who attended our panel today, and have a great weekend.